decide and what the citizens are expected to do and what they should know. So in America, their constitution is just a single written document. Yeah, that's the American Constitution, which is exemplifying several clauses that consolidate authorities. Yeah, it gives different authorities in terms of written text to different people, and it is only done through strict supermajority approval. Yeah, the Constitution is a written document that goes through a process of which supermajority of the people needs to approve it before it becomes the Constitution. Now, that kind of formalization invests precision. So there has to be a level of precision to that document. There is consistency in abiding by that document, and it aligns with the institutions that are already existing within the country, and that's for written document. The point of it is that that document has gone through a process of having to develop these laws, having to bring it forward to a supermajority of people and institutions, and that has to be approved. Once approved, they have to be clearly written and stated in a document. Now, that document is one of the most powerful books that every country would have. So for countries who have written constitution, that document is actually a very powerful one. The text there is not just written text, but they are backed by powers. They are backed by strict approvals, and so they have heavyweights with them. So for every declaration that is made within that document, it comes with power, and everyone is supposed to be aware of the content and know how to abide by it. On the other side, we have unwritten documents that represent constitution, or written constitution rather. And an example of that is actually in the Great Britain, where you have the British Constitution. In the UK, it has over time evolved. That is, many changes have happened in the course of time to their constitution that not necessarily entailed having a single written document with authoritative backing. Yeah, so over time, different principles have gotten shaped, even by the legislative statutes. Some principles have been shaped just based on executive orders, that is like from the top tier level of government, and then they redesign certain statutes, they redesign certain principles. Some of them are based on court orders from the judiciary, yeah, and some are just based on political conventions. So this document is such that it changes, and they not necessarily are written in one single formalized document. And it is based on emerging realities. Yeah? So it is based on the belief that as we evolve, different things are changing. So they need to adapt their constitution, or the knowledge of their constitution, to changing times. However, strict and written documents like the American Constitution, you don't just easily amend. If you want to amend, it takes another process again, and engaging all stakeholders such that it will be rewritten, modified, and then accepted by the majority, after which that constitution can then be ratified. Now, in the case of unwritten constitution, the diffusion actually still causes a problem, because at the end of the day, there would be a risk of inconsistency. If it can easily evolve, then sometimes in certain regions it might be inconsistent with what people had earlier on believed. So sometimes, from time to time, that could occur, and that's one of the risks and challenge of having unwritten constitutions. Another form of categorization of the constitutions generally is rigid and flexible. Yeah, and it's quite synonymous really to written and unwritten, because for written, oftentimes are not written constitutions are rigid, and the unwritten ones are flexible. They can easily change. By rigid, it means they are very firm and abiding. Yeah, they don't just change all of a sudden. So, for instance, if you check the Soviet Union there, which is, of course, towards the European part of the world, the Soviet Union, and upholding their sovereignty principle since 1918. Yeah. Now, there are certain mandates that have been included there. You see things around the communist rule, allowing that there is no alternative ideological versions. Yeah, so that document is then has remained that document. They don't want an alternative idea. They don't want any other version. And so it has been centralized. Yeah. And since that is the way it is, the execution of that document is from the top. Yeah. And trickles down to the bottom. However, the problem with that inflexibility is that things change, things evolve, and so it doesn't embrace evolution of ideas. It doesn't accommodate diverse ideas. And at the end of the day, it's oftentimes we constrain the need for considering diversity and very optimal political outcomes. And those are like the things that should I say, challenges of the rigid constitution. But when you have flexible constitutions, for instance, you see the example here is the South African Constitution. Yeah, it gives you the right to amend the constitution at the legislative level. Yeah, so being able to amend the constitution over time through even the third and fourth parliamentary approvals, you will see things like the second and third ratification. So this just basically illustrates changes over time that can be made. Some can be made at the parliament level, some can be made at the legislative level. And these changes come up just so that they can adopt things that come up with time without having to completely ratify the whole referendum. Yeah. Now, this measure offers flexibility, tries to balance, okay, a stable policy, a stable constitution, together with the fact that things are changing over time, and then align it with the needs of governance, aligns it with the present day reality, and then accommodate other things that occur over time. And you can see that society is changing really. For rigid constitutions, it becomes really hard to be able to accommodate the several changes happening in society. The next categorization I want us to quickly look at is constitutions with legal continuity and constitutions with political discontinuity. From the terms that you've seen here now, it shows you that one can actually continue legally over time. And for one, if there is a change based on political ideologies, then the entire constitution that existed before would have to stop such that a new one can then come up and continue from there. Yeah, so an old one has to end, maybe ending with a particular political tenure, ending with a particular political ideology, such that a new one can then begin. But when we look at legal continuity, it derives its own legitimacy from consolidation over time of tested conventions. Yeah, and an example is the Swedish constitution, meaning it evolves organically. But it doesn't mean that the constitution will be changed. Yeah. What it means is that there is a constitution that is existing, and then you begin to hear conversations around amendment. Yeah. The constitution is being amended. By amendment, it means that maybe there is an aspect of the constitution that needs remodification. Maybe there's an aspect of the constitution that needs a number of things added to it. Yeah. Now, a constitution within Sweden rather, has been existing since 1803. Same constitution, but then there have been several amendments, and the last amendment was in 1979. Yeah, just so that they can add on some extra economic principle. Now, when you begin to add such gradual legal continuity, it basically is what characterizes a constitution that has legal continuity, meaning that it can be built on. Yeah, so you strengthen the positives of that particular constitution. As things are changing, you remodify it, you improve on it, but you don't completely abolish or nullify it. Yeah. Whereas for political discontinuity, it is dissimilar, it's completely apart. Yeah. So you see the case of Indonesia. In 1945, a completely different constitution came into play. In 1949, the same thing, and then it just continues to change like that. Yeah. Now, where you have this political discontinuity without adequate assimilation, it would cause a level of instability. For instance, a particular government comes into power, and then within their period of reign, say for 5 years, for instance, they come up with a constitution that everyone is supposed to abide by. Now, everyone will try to adjust, try to understand the constitution. Imagine as a Nigerian citizen, I would often ask, how many of you are well aware of the constitution right now? How many of you know what the constitution entails? Some of us don't know them as they are written, but because we've lived in Nigeria, we've seen how certain things work, and we've been able to understand the constitution from those lenses. However, imagine having to know a constitution within 5 years, and then when you are done with that, another political leadership come into power and then comes up with a different political ideology. Now, it is not expected that what you have known in the past 5 years, you have to discard it to be able to now learn another kind of constitution for another given period. So it causes a level of instability, and of course, for governance, it becomes difficult because if you govern with a particular constitution for 5 years, and then I'm coming in to lead and I'm governing with a different constitution, it takes time for the people to adapt. It takes time for the people to know the constitution, and then it will cause a level of instability within the constitution, and of course, in terms of governance. So that is that about understanding constitution for what it is and a different categorization of constitution that we have. Note that we'll be alluding to some of those things earlier on as we move on in the class. But then there is also what we call international constitution. Maybe I would now engage the class once again. International constitution, from your idea of what constitution is like, what then do you think international constitution is? What is international constitution? Who wants to go first? Now we've talked about constitution, we've explained what it is. What do you think an international constitution is? I could call names, so maybe before that she can engage me. You not necessarily have to
International
sing
constitution.
from what's on my screen. So who's speaking?
Schweib.
All right, please go ahead.
International constitution is the law that guides all the countries, individual
All the
countries.
countries.
Yes.
Interesting. All right, who has a complementary idea? All right, Richard. So I think so
Okay,
far,
thank you.
just
From
3 people have been speaking in the class: Richard, Schwaib, and Temitayo. I look forward to getting responses from others. Yes, Richard.
okay, thank you. From the name International Constitution, we can deduce that the constitution maybe that binds the international organizations, the international bodies, and maybe each country. I mean, each countries of the world at the international stage. That's according to my own layman understanding, sir.
Yeah, that's profound. Thanks for that wonderful attempt. Maybe one last trial. I think Christian is writing. If anyone wants to speak before Christian drops his comments, then please just go ahead before we proceed. What do you think? Does that mean that there is something that guides every country on planet Earth? Does that mean that there are laid down principles that actually guide everyone, more like an international constitution that every nation must abide by? So Christian is saying that just like we have the United Nations Organization, it's a constitution that guides member countries. Thank you for that particular addition. It is very profound because of the use of member countries. Yeah. So international constitution basically refers to frameworks, yeah, that brings about a global governing structure. And the United Nations is a very good example. Yeah. If we are having the United Nations and you're a member country of the United Nations, for us to have law, for us to have order, for it to be systemic, for us to have a free flow of having to understand what to do and how to do it with time, then we need a constitution. Yeah. So when you bring different countries together, all of those countries, trust me, they have their individual national constitution. So when you bring Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Germany, Sweden, United States of America, and you bring Canada together, for instance, they are coming all together with their constitution. Now, as a body, whose constitution will they abide by? Will they choose to abide by Nigeria's constitution? Or they will choose to abide by US's constitution? Or they will choose to abide by Sweden's constitutions? So it becomes a problem to decide on one constitution amongst the individual countries to abide by, hence the need for an international constitution. And that's why you see that for international bodies like the United Nations that bring together member countries, there are always frameworks and proposals, yeah, by which they are governed, by which certain problems are addressed, by which there is a structure of administration. Yeah. So you see those frameworks, those guidelines are what I refer to as the international constitutions that we have, and they can be broad. They can be specific to different sectors based on the problems that are being addressed. One, you have Universal Declaration of Rights. You might want to note these things down because if I were you, can you check and find out how many kinds of declarations of rights do we have? We have those on human rights internationally. We have those on indigenous people's rights. You might want to check all of those things out. Now, they put together a document that guides how human rights should be taken. What are the rights that humans have by placing individuals at the center, irrespective of nationalities. And this is how it works. So once you're a member of the United Nations, for instance, there is an existing document on the Universal Declaration of Rights that says that as humans, we have, of course, right to life, right to live in a country where you're born, your country of birth, right to live in any part of your country. You have right to freedom of speech, you have right to movement, you have right to practice profession. A lot of rights exist here. Now, all of these rights are also embedded within the Universal Declarations. So as a member of the UN, for instance, your country is a member of the United Nations. It is expected that your country complies with the UN's Universal Declaration of Rights. Yeah, so you can fight for your rights based on your understanding of the international constitution, which your country is actually a member of or a member to. So you need to know that there are rights such as the Universal Declaration of Rights. There are other forms of international constitution, such like the planetary preservation principles. I don't know how many of you have heard of things like the United Nations Climate Change Convention. You've heard of things like the Sustainable Development Goals. You've heard of things like the Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, all of these are examples of planetary preservation principles. So this is the way it works for most international constitutions. I'll give you an example. So we look at environmental degradation and see that it is fast happening within the globe. And for instance, climate change also, which is also very common, is a problem that is affecting not just my country. It's a problem also affecting your country. It's a problem affecting all countries out there. Now, knowing that as a Nigerian, it is affecting Nigeria, but much more, it is affecting other countries, then the countries will come together to form a body. For instance, the good thing about being a party to the United Nations is that the United Nations now divides itself into addressing several other challenges. So at the United Nations level, you would see United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. You will see United Nations Framework to combat environmental degradation and desertification. You see frameworks to combat certain specific things. Yeah. Now, for each of those frameworks, there will now be a need to have a constitution that everyone is expected to abide by. However, you will get to see where the problem is. But one other kind of international constitution we have are constitutions on shared digital governance. Yeah, governance structures for when there is, of course, transfer of knowledge and technology. So there are constitutions that actually guide how that security in terms of governance is there, inclusion, accountability, technology, and related. So there are international constitutions for that. There are also international constitutions that guide against crime. Now, crime against humanity, particularly, international constitutions like that. I would really encourage you to check out different examples of these international constitutions that I'm giving right now so that we can run through a number of other things. Now, there is also the mandatory justice framework as an international constitution. Now, this is related to, many of you would have heard it, and these are like terms that I expected you to mention as we proceed with the conversation. You've heard of something around the International Criminal Court. Yeah. Now, this criminal court basically just facilitates third-person trials against things like genocide, against war crimes, against torture. And so, for instance, you get to watch CNN and you're watching Al Jazeera, and we are having conversation on the Hezbollah battle with Israel, and then you're having conversations on Russia having to threaten with missiles against a particular country. Now, if any of these things have to be addressed, they most likely be addressed through the International Criminal Court, because that is the jurisdiction where all of this kind of crimes can get to be addressed, of course, under the mandatory justice framework. Now, we have a problem, however, with the international constitution that we have. Yeah. Note that for now, there is no formal one document international constitution that exists that every country must abide by. We don't have anything like that. So we have constitutions that target particular issues and challenges, and those constitutions are only abided by people who become member to that convention, people who become members to that treaty, people who become members to that frameworks. Yeah, they are the only ones that are expected to abide by the constitution guiding that convention or treaty or framework. So you should know. Now, one of the problems we have in terms of the effectiveness of international constitution is in terms of national sovereignty concerns. Yeah, so we come together as a nation, as a globe rather, to address a particular problem. However, as individual nations, as individual countries, we have certain sovereignty concerns. We have how we administrate powers. We have things that are of sovereignty to us. Yeah. However, some of these global frameworks can be perceived, depending on the issue that is on ground, to erode some of our unilateral control. Yeah. So we feel that we should have power, for instance, as a country, Nigeria, and we feel that our structural laid down governance structure should take charge, yeah, of certain things. Now imagine then escalating these issues to the international constitution. Then it feels like as a country we are losing our own unilateral control. I don't know if you get that. Now that is one of the concerns that most countries have about international constitution. And that problem that they have is such that because individual countries have individual challenges, individual priorities, and individual capacity, it becomes almost difficult, for instance, to just comply wholeheartedly with an international constitution. So, for instance, the Climate Change Convention will mandate that developed countries should pay a particular amount into the International Climate Change Fund to be able to address problems in developing countries. Now, that is a mandate in the Constitution. But then the developed countries can choose not to do that because they think they will definitely say that they have their own national priorities. Yeah. They have what they want to channel their money to do within a particular period. Or in other cases, based on their capacity, they don't have the capacity to comply. Yeah. And then brings me to the last problem, compliance. Now, international constitutions and conventions oftentimes are open-ended in terms of compliance. Yeah. In Nigeria, for instance, we have law and we have compliance structures. Yeah. And that is why even if you have laws that advise you against theft, laws that advise you against criminal offenses, you also have people like the police force, you have institutions like the court of law, so that we know we have told you not to do those things. But should you do it, there is a measure in place to address your excesses. Yeah. Now, these are some of the things that have already been laid down to address infringement on these constitutional rights, and when you disobey or you flout this constitution. Unfortunately, within the international space, there is nothing like that. So you should be aware. Even if you become a member, and that's the reason you can see that different nations can choose to do things even out of, and you wonder, why exactly are you doing these things if you are a member to the United Nations? The problem actually is that although being a member, you cannot dictate to them what they should do or what they shouldn't do. At the end of the day, there are constitutional declarations that state, okay, you should do this, you should do that. But if they don't do it as a country, you can't do anything about that. Yeah, and that's the problem I have with international constitution. So we gather together, we say that, okay, you do this, you do that. Everyone is expected to submit these documents, submit this draft, do this, donate this amount, bring this and that. And at the end of the day, when everybody goes back home, they can now choose to do whatever they like within their individual countries. It takes a level of commitment and compliance to be able to abide by international constitution. So those are like the things you should know that hamper the compliance and the effectiveness of the international constitution. And that would just bring me to the conversation on the supremacy of the Nigerian constitution. But before I proceed with that, I want to quickly ask if you have any question or concern or maybe comment with regards to the international constitution. Yes, Richard.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. This is a very good and expository lesson, which I'm learning a lot from. I remember the last time I did this kind of things was government in secondary school, and it brought down some old memory. So I just wanted to ask few questions. And
All
number one
right.
is while you were mentioning written and unwritten constitution, you made mention of flexible and non-flexible constitution. And I wanted to ask, can we say that the military regime, because you made mention of some country like, is it Sweden or such countries?
Yeah,
Can we,
yeah, I mentioned a number of countries.
so can we say that the military, they were practicing or they were ruling with unwritten constitution? And talking about constitution, I really want to ask this question. Is an age-long question about Nigerian constitution. We've been practicing the 1999 constitution even till now.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't think it has really been helpful. Is it not high time Nigeria come together and draft a constitution that we can relate to it, that would advance the cause of this country? And lastly, the last question I want to ask is about the international constitution. You made mention of, you've been referring to the UNO. So I want to ask, do we have regional constitution? For instance, the reason why I ask this is ECOWAS, something like
All right.
ECOWAS Charter or African Union Charter. So all those things, can we say that they are
Is it me or I'm losing you, or are you done with the questions?
Yes, I'm done. I'm done with the questions.
Uh, All right, beautiful. So I was trying to note down your question so that I could give proper answers to that. Yeah, I would speak from my own perspectives really on this. Now, for the military regime, of course, they did not adhere to in Nigeria. They did not adhere to any strict written constitutions. Yeah. Now there were existing set of rules. Yeah, they were oftentimes known as decrees, and oftentimes they come from the head of state. Yeah, so the decree is made by the head of state, and all of a sudden, you know that, of course, military personnel run with this decree to see that they were being executed and complied by. So once the decree is made, what is expected next is the execution, and then on our part as citizen, what was expected at the time was compliance, just to guide governance structure. Yeah. Now, however, there were certain decrees that actually changed. Some of them were stable, some of them were predictable, some of them were not. But then there was also some form of written constitution at the time. But majority of what was enacted during the military regime in Nigeria were more or less unwritten, and then they were promulgated as decrees. So you see that the head of state at the time wanted to make a decree, and then everybody's listening. And then once the decree is passed down, before you know it, it is enshrined into the subconscious of everyone. But even if it's not enshrined, you can be sure that the authorities will definitely carry out the execution, and it is expected from everyone, the compliance. Now, moving to the question of whether it's not high time that Nigeria amends or come up with a new constitution. And if you hear the conversation I was saying, we talked about how that the constitution has legal continuity and some has political discontinuity. The constitution is flexible while some aren't. Now, we know that the Nigeria's constitution has actually been criticized because it has its origin within the military rule. Yeah. Now, a new constitution, no doubt, would actually provide an opportunity for us to now address some issues that are new to us. Yeah. However, it is a complex one because a systemic overhaul is difficult, because as that constitution was established, it was established with legal continuity. So over time, what has been happening has been the need for change or modification, yeah, amendment, like it is generally called, of that constitution. But I won't be here to ascertain whether it is high time we drafted a new one. But trust me, for the implementation of a new one, there are several processes that have to be taken into consideration. Yeah, although the amendments that we had since 1999, which in my opinion, based on recent developments, may need extra amendments because it's been how many years now? More than 20 years now. A number of things have changed, but to enact a new constitution will be difficult. But trust me, I understand your opinion as to the fact that a new constitution will definitely better illustrate our current realities. It will also reflect the aspirations of the Nigerian people. It will incorporate different stakeholders, and that's why it's quite challenging, because if we want to enact one now, the processes are going to be fast-stretched. Yeah, but of course, you know, Nigeria, and I might not be able to give details on that, my perspective on the whole thing. But yeah, of course, you can see how it is. Even the last time we were supposed to have a census, a number of logistics and several factors in between to even make it happen. And then having to have a constitution that will integrate different stakeholders might be a fast stretch at this time. But indeed, the concerns about having a constitution, a new constitution in Nigeria, is very valid. And to your last question, that actually speaks to if we have regional frameworks and constitutions, most definitely we do. We do have them. And good, you mentioned examples of ECOWAS and the African Union. Yeah, there are a couple of them like that. There are the African Union, and there are existing regional constitutions that bind every member. And that's why you can see that the fact that you are existing as a West African country doesn't mean automatically you would find yourself in the ECOWAS. So there is a way to go about it, to be a party to it, and then every other thing in between. So I can see comments here, and I think that's the reason I'm distracted. So yes, there are regional constitutions that binds regional organizations and bodies like the ECOWAS and African Union that we have. So the military worked with the decrees. 1999 constitution was coined by military. Yeah, definitely. Ideally, has to be changed. Yeah. Now, why the military? Why the 1999 constitution is still existing is because it has taken into account some of our differences right now, considering that, of course, we are in a democracy. So it's an extended version of definitely the 1979 constitution as amended, needs to be overhauled. Yeah, these conversations actually are very, very valid, and I understand where it is coming from. However, and that's the thing. Now, it now brings into the fore, how then do we tailor our needs or our concerns if this needs a complete overhaul? Then, now know that as citizens, we ourselves, or individually or independently, cannot enact or initiate the process of a overhaul of the 1999 Constitution. Yeah, but once the concerns are valid, in my opinion, there are. I also share certain personal sentiments I might not share. But in a time like this, one thing you want to know is, for you to make that happen, then there has to be principles to it. Yeah. How do we initiate this change? Through advocacy, through, for instance, several legal civil society organizations. How do we kickstart the conversation? Yeah. And what are the processes to now begin the complete overhaul? Now, it is difficult because it was established as a constitution with legal continuity. And like I had established earlier on, if it was a constitution that had, of course, this political discontinuity, it would have been easier to just nullify and then come up with a newer one. But then these are conversations that we indeed need to have. So I would just proceed with the Nigerian constitution, since that's what we are delving into right now. Let me check time. Okay. The supremacy of the Nigerian constitution. Now, in Nigeria, our constitution basically represents the fundamental law where the people can abide by, where the country places its authority on. Yeah, it is the primary legal foundation that guides how the nation is governed, how power is distributed, and what are the obligations of the people or the citizens of the country. Now, when we look at the Nigerian constitution, we have designated powers. Yeah, powers designated across the national government and the state government. However, we have what we call the concurrent powers. Now, the concurrent powers really are powers that are shared, meaning both the national government have the powers as much as the state government also have the powers. Now, what are the powers that the national government have? Let me hear from everyone in the class. So just speak to me. What are the powers? Since you're in Nigeria, in fact, perhaps you should be the one schooling me on this topic. We've also, of course, lived in Nigeria, so we understand these things. What do you think are the powers that the national government have? Yeah, anybody? Just raise your hand, or you can unmute and speak. Yeah. What are the powers that the national government has? National government of Nigeria for specific purposes. So I think I would like to hear more from people I've not heard from. Maybe I might not want to hear from Richard like right now. I would call names, so you can raise your hand, somebody else. It's on the screen, even if it means reading what's on my screen, but I want to hear from you. What are the powers that the national government have? Covenant, Jeffrey. I want to be sure we're together in this class. Okay, so Covenant is not with us, I would assume. Jonathan, what are the powers that the national government have? Can see something in the chat. Okay, hurry. All right. So I'm assuming that Jonathan is also not with us. Okay, let me hear you, Richard.
Okay, thank you, sir. Though I can't
Yes,
see the screen, I think it's due to my network, but I can hear the question clearly. I think the federal government has power to conduct election. It has power to conduct census, and it has power to protect the citizen, the citizen of Nigeria. Those are the
yeah.
powers I think the government. It has a lot of other powers too, but those are the ones that are coming to my head right now.
We're gonna do a quick sample after I present what's on my slide on the power sharing, so that you can also speak to me on things that are not necessarily mentioned here that I would also maybe like to hear. And Jonathan, I'm concerned for you. Why is that your choice of power? And you indicated power to declare war. Of all the powers, you chose that to share. Anyway, that's also very correct. The national government has the power to declare war. Yeah, and so we see that you must have heard about different things on foreign trade, foreign exchange. You must have also heard on conversation around African Free Trade Zone. You must have heard of things about, of course, money and foreign exchange, as it were. Now, these are conversations that are had at the federal level, at the national level. Yeah. So the national government has the power on foreign and interstate commerce, how they regulate. Sorry about that. How they regulate trade with the country and other countries, how they regulate trade within the country, and how that trades intra-continent and internationally is carried out. Yeah, the task involve the policies that binds it, the levies that are attached to it are all regulated and by the national government, because they are the ones with the authority to do that. Now, they have power on coin money. Of course, when it comes to money, money is not operated or institutionalized by the state. Yeah, the money we spend, regulation of the naira, having to have a central tendency, legal tendency, is not illegal tender rather, is not administrated by the state government. It's definitely administrated by the national government. They have the power to provide security for the country. And that's why you see that they're the ones who provide the army, they're the ones who provide the navy. Yeah. And they have power at different points in time to declare war. They can declare war interstate, and they can also declare war intrastate. Yeah, they can also declare war internationally. So imagine you're just on your own. You didn't have, let me allude to Jonathan's choice of powers. Imagine you didn't have any business trying to talk of any issue. You were just sitting on your own, and then all of a sudden you started seeing publications from maybe a different news outlets in Nigeria, and you started seeing publications from even the official accounts of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and you see publications that are insinuating war against the United States, or publications that are insinuating war against Russia. As a typical citizen, you say, it's not my business. How did we get here? Why? What have I? Because you don't have a say in that kind of thing. because the power is designated to the national government to declare war when necessary. So there are certain powers that are already conferred on these authorities. Now, they also have the power to establish courts. I am sure that you know the different levels of courts that we have. Established federal courts below the Supreme Court. Yeah, of course, we have the Supreme as like it sounds, the Supreme, and they can also establish federal courts now that are below the Supreme Court. They are the ones who conduct foreign relations. Yeah. So, for instance, the governor of Lagos State would not, on his own volition, have a negotiation with the United States or have a negotiation with France on something that concerns the general interest of the country. So the national government definitely coordinates that. And then, of course, they exercise power implied from the expressed power. So if any power has been expressed either by international government, who gets to exercise that power is actually the national government. So, for instance, Nigeria becomes a party to an international organization or an international convention. So, the constitution that exists, that is expected that Nigeria abides by, it is going to be executed and implemented nationally by the national government. And I'll just quickly go to the other side, which is the state government. Yeah. Now, in terms of intrastate commerce, that is within the state. For instance, within Lagos State, who regulates commerce, who regulates buying and selling? It is the Lagos State government. Where to buy, where not to buy, where to sell, what it costs for you to stay where you want to sell, how that your goods have to move, what are the levies that you have to pay for the movement of your goods and services, what are the taxes that are associated with that, can and is decided upon by the state government. Yeah, they also established the local government systems. And that's why you see, and it's common knowledge that for every state, you have local government. Now, for every local government, you also have a level of leadership at the local government. The power to establish these local government systems actually dwells or is inherent of the state government. Now, at the state level, they have the power to administer elections. Yeah, and you can see the emphasis I made. At the state level, they have the power to administer elections. One other thing they can actually do is that at the state level, they get to protect public health, welfare, and morals. That's why you see that even at state government level, you would see that we have Ministry of Health, as you have departments of health, even at state level, you have state department. There's also the need to take care of welfare. There's also the need to abide by certain moral values in societies. So you have all of these structures that are being established by the state government to amplify and then to further execute their level of authority and power within the state. Now, knowing that the national government has its own power that is known as inherent, expressed, and implied, reserved powers are for the state government. Now, we have what we call the concurrent powers, things that both the national and state government have the power to do. I want to hear examples of that. So, as much as the state government can do this, the national government can also do that. As much as the national government can do this, the state government can also do that. Let me hear from somebody. Just unmute and speak. I don't want to go back to my tab. So what are those things that the state and the national government have the powers to actually do?
Hello,
What
can
are
you
the
hear me?
sectors? Yes, let me please go ahead.
Okay, please, I want to ask a question based on what you just explained, that the state it's the state.
All right, please.
So there's there's a tax reform bill that is when you go online, it's circulating like wildfire now. Spearheaded by this man, Mr. Taiwo Yedele, this tax guru guy, and he represents the federal government though. So I haven't completely understood the tax reform, but it's causing a lot of uproar with a lot of Nigerians. So, and with what you explained, you said it's the state government that can enforce payment of tax, right? Or was that not what you said,
Now,
sir?
yeah, at the state level for operations that are
Okay, at the
carried out
state
within the
level.
state, correct?
Okay, so this particular tax reform that is spreading like wildfire, it's the federal government that is spreading it. So is
Yeah,
it not clashing with the state's uh, power, with the state's government jurisprudence?
yeah,
That's the question.
interesting. Beautiful questions. And I think it is profound that it's coming down since we are talking about concurrent powers. Yeah, concurrent powers. So you can see that in this intersect box here, where we have the concurrent powers, meaning the national government can do it as well as the state government. But now let me tell you where it becomes different. Yeah. So maybe I'll just throw it open too, and then maybe you as well as other members of the class can just answer. When I say, for instance, we are talking about levying taxes. Yeah, this can actually be done by the state government and also by the national government. So the quick question is this: if the state government passes a task bill, yeah, and then levies tax rather for a particular purpose, that tax is legally binding on what jurisdiction, what coverage?
The state, I will say.
Profound. Now, it is binding on the state. So it is expected that everyone who is within that state would definitely comply with that particular policy, that tax that has been levied. Yeah. Now, if
Exactly.
the federal government negotiated a tax reform bill and it has been passed down, ratified, accepted, and then launched for execution, who is expected, or that particular reform or that particular levy would be legally binding across what jurisdiction?
The entire country,
Now, that's
I
what
think.
makes it different. Yeah, because that's it. Now, a state can levy taxes, the national government can levy taxes. The difference is if Lagos State levies a tax, it doesn't apply to somebody in Rivers State. Yeah. Once the federal government levies a tax, as much as it applies to somebody in the FCT right now, it applies also to somebody else in Akwa Ibom, to somebody else in Nasarawa, somebody else in Sokoto, across the entire federation. And that's where you see that although there are concurrent powers, the jurisdiction within which a concurrent power can operate is restricted, of course, to where that administration has the power. So, of course, state has the power over the state, and the national government has power within the entire national government. And yes, if you look at the tax reform bill, why it is causing an uproar is because rather the task is not just coming as okay, so there is a tax now. We all know that there is actually a task. What is happening is that there is a value added tax increase. Yeah, your VAT means that there has been a significant increase from what it used to be. Meaning that for everybody who would be paying tax, or who definitely, because of course as citizens you pay your tax definitely has increased. Now, what happens when your VAT increases, or when the federal government increases your VAT? It applies to almost every other thing and every other sector in terms of your purchases, in terms of your loans, in terms of transportation and everything in between. Because for the increments in value added tax, meaning for every time value is added for any services, there'll be increase in the tax that you get to pay. So that means to cut across a number of things. And of course, I don't need to tell you what the ripple effect will be on your earnings. Yeah. So if you're earning a particular amount and your tax used to be at a particular level before, it has moved from 7.5% to 10%. And the interesting thing about this reform is that there is a target of 15% by 2030. So now you can better understand why people are, you can understand the uproars, yeah, that people are having. And that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the place of, okay, so we are paying 7.5% before, now you're increasing to 10%. And then you're still promising that from now to about 2030, we'll be increasing to 15%. And I think that's just the basic reason, considering the ripple effect that this value-added tax would actually cause. And these are the reasons why the opera is existing. So I guess that answers your questions, Richard. All right.
Perfectly, sir.
And so
Perfectly captured. Thank you.
all right, good. We'll just proceed right about now. So part of the things that I wanted us to get to know that the state government and the national government have powers over, aside what is on my screen right now in terms of establishing courts. So you have courts that are, in fact, local government courts, they're established by the states, yeah, are different local governments. And sometimes you wonder why people travel all the way to maybe get married in certain kind of courts. Meanwhile, there are courts that have already been established at state level. So the state has about established courts. They can also enforce laws. Yeah. And so, for instance, I might not be able to give very clear examples, but I traverse a couple of places. I traverse Lagos, Ibadan, of course, in Nigeria here. And then you need to get acquainted with how that you obey certain laws in Lagos as much as you obey those laws in Oyo State. So for instance, you're in Oyo State. Yeah. There are certain things that could be overlooked, maybe when you're driving on the road. On the contrary, in Lagos State, if you commit such an offense, you will be prosecuted. There's a charge for it, there's a penalty for it. And I think it's common within transportation and navigating, yeah. It differs. So you can see that a state government can actually enact a law that is binding within the state, and it also has the power to enforce it within that state. Yeah, so you know that you need to be aware that although there are federal laws governing the entire state, there are principles that governs everyone within the countries, there are also laws that are intrinsic to the particular state where you are in. And that's one very important thing that we should note. So if you're moving from a particular state, for instance, you're moving from Kano and you're coming to reside in Lagos, you now need to be abreast of certain laws that are particular to Lagos State, because there are state laws and there are concurrent powers. So as the federal laws are running, they are running concurrently with the state law. So as an individual, you understand that you're abiding by the federal laws as much as you are abiding by the state laws where you are resident part time and where every other operations of yours actually take place. Other parts of the concurrent powers I wanted to also share with us really is things like education, agriculture, health, housing, public order, even state policing in terms of maintaining public order. You can see that, for instance, in terms of road and having to ensure traffic obeisance are related. You have the last mile here in Lagos State. I think in Oyo you have the OISTMA. I think they call it OISTMA in Oyo State also. And so you can see that there are differences. Yeah, and then they run side by side with the existence of federal police. Yeah, so as much as you have federal policing working, yeah, you still have state policing, which is existing and also functional. As much as you have federal housing, you still have state housing. As much as you have the Federal Ministry of Health, you still have the State Department of Health. So these are things that can actually run concurrently, and these are how that powers are divided within the country. So the reserved powers are those that are peculiar to the state alone. The expressed, implied, and the inherent powers are those that are for the national government, and the concurrent powers are those that are for the national and state governments running concurrently. Now, the supremacy of the Nigerian Constitution plays a unifying role, such that despite how diverse we are ethnically, despite how diverse we are religiously, it is expected that everyone pays obeisance and abides by the Nigeria Constitution. And that is the reason it is supreme. So this statement here reads that the supremacy clause plays a pivotal unifying role in Nigeria's ethnically and religiously diverse federation. The common allegiance fostered by constitutional reverence, focusing on shared universal rights and freedoms, remains indispensable for national harmony beyond partisan interest to fulfill inclusive development. The long and short of this story is basically saying that in Nigeria, we understand that we have people from various tribes. We understand we have people with different religious affiliations. We understand we have people with different political inclinations. We understand we have different people with different backgrounds. Now, this constitution comes in and says that despite all of this, everyone should be in allegiance to the Nigerian Constitution, and that is why it is supreme. So just know that you need to be familiar with Nigeria's Constitution, because no matter who you are, no matter where you work, what you do, where you grew up from, who your mother is, who your father is, where you were born into, as long as you're a Nigerian living in Nigeria, you need to be familiar and abide by the Nigeria Constitution, and that's why it is supreme. So we want to just quickly run through the key parts of the Nigerian Constitution. First of which is the fundamental rights. Yeah, one of the things that the Nigerian Constitution constitutes are our fundamental rights, enshrining the essential human right principles that governs domains like, and these are some of the things you should know. Equality before the law. Now, I understand that we know what the typical Nigerian society looks like. I am not oblivious of that, because these are kind of things you hear, and then you're wondering, and we hear all of these things all the time. We get trained on these things, but we don't exactly see them in operation in society. But just know that these are the elements of the Nigerian Constitution, and they are binding. And if fought well for, they stand. Yeah. So one of which is the fact that we are equal before the law. One of the things that the Constitution emphasizes are equality before the law. So every man appears before the law equally, even if, of course, I know you might also have comments about that and the way things are being done severally. But yes, there is equality before the law. There is also freedom of speech. Yeah, and there's freedom of speech, freedom of beliefs. There's also liberty to movement. Yeah, you are at liberty to do certain things within the confines of the law. You have the ability to move, and that's why, as a Nigerian who perhaps is from Oyo State, you can just say that you want to relocate to Delta State. You can choose to relocate to Rivers for different reasons, maybe to start up a life there, to work there. You have that freedom. Now, there is also human rights that protect the interest of, protect both the interest and the welfare of children and women. Yeah. So you have all of those things within the human right, particularly the part 4, which signifies the Constitution's commitment to pursue inclusive dignity through state obligations. Because we are talking about the Nigerian Constitution, I know that the document in itself might be very cumbersome for you to go through everything, but if you can, download the document and have it with you. It contains different relevant things that you would be alluding to over time. Now, moving on, there are instruments within this constitution, especially within the confines of the human rights, fundamental rights of every citizen of Nigeria. There are instruments that prohibit. Yeah, somebody wants to say something. Hello. Please go ahead.
Yes, sorry. I wanted to ask a question.
All right, please.
Okay. So you were making mention of the sovereignty of the state, and you made mention of state police, like state
Okay.
policing, and you said you think state policing is I forgot how you said the word. So I want to ask, is state, because a country as Nigeria, state policing, there has been a lot of debates about it, that we should go back to state policing. We shouldn't have a centralized system of policing, which is causing a lot of issues. So you alluded that we have state policing that is functioning in Nigeria. You mentioned in your state that there are some guys there here in Lagos too. So state policing, to me, I don't think it's in effect in Nigeria. And if we can go back to state policing, it's going to help the country a lot, because it's going to minimize crime. Because the central police body, we know what they are doing. So if we can go back to state policing, each state policing their state, it's going to drastically reduce crime. And we would know, neighborhood watch, we know the people, the police that are in the state, in and out of the state, not like the federal government posting someone from the north to south or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for that. And you can see very well
Area.
that
I don't
when I
think it is.
was giving my examples on state policing, I mentioned, and maybe that was where you got it maybe wrong. Yeah, because by emphasis, we know that Nigeria does not actually subscribe to state policing right now. There is no state policing, in fact, of having police, yeah, per state. Yeah, what we have, yeah, you see, when you have your what's the term I could use for them? I gave examples of oyster rather, and then last mile. These are examples of quasi-police institutions that are restricted to the state. Yeah, and these are law-abiding and enforcing officials. Yeah, so maybe a better way to put that to aid your understanding would be to know that there are people who, at the state level, have the authority to enforce laws that are not exactly binding across the federation, but are just binding within the state. But yes, there have been conversations on state policing within Nigeria. The necessity has been brought to the fore, and how that this will take into consideration different peculiarities within the state. One of the problems that we are still seeing is that this has not been considered at the legislative level and agreed upon, such that we can see it implemented. The debate is currently ongoing, however, for security and efficiency within the country, but it hasn't been enacted. And so what you just have, because for instance, you see, because now brings up the conversation on, okay, when you have across some parts of the Southwest, you see there's this thing particular to your state also. I can't remember their name now, what they are called, but they are
Amotekun.
particular to, yeah, thank
Amotekun.
you. They are the Amotekun, yeah. You can see that those are not necessarily federal policies, yeah, but they are also armed forces that are implementing and ensuring law and order within the state, yeah. So those are just quasi examples that states can actually take themselves to ensure law and order. The conversation on having state police is still very much ongoing, and yeah, but it hasn't been implemented in Nigeria, and it's something that, like you said, has been necessitated. So note that we have highlighted fundamental human rights, and we'll be going on a break right now, after which we then come back to address the other aspects of this conversation. I hope that you've had a good time so far. You can just give a thumbs up. Let me know that you are following and you've been following and you've had a good time. All right, good. I've seen Richard. I want to assume every other person is on this call, so just give a reaction. All right, Schwab. Yeah, good. Yeah. All right, so we're just going to break now and we'll be back, I think, in the next 30 minutes thereabout.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Okay, so we'll be going on a 30 minutes break. We'll be back by 12 noon. So please get your glass of water or something to chew on, and then we'll be back by 12 noon. I believe the class has been very interesting, and please do not be late. Just be prompt, and so we can start off from where we've stopped. See you in a bit. All right. Welcome back to class, everyone. Without waste of time, we will continue from where we stopped so we can really round up and we don't end up spending much time than expected. Okay, so please, Mr. Lawrence, you can take it up from here, please.
All right. Thank you very much. And I want to believe that it was a good break for us all. So I'm just going to proceed with the slides right about now. So we might get a bit fast paced so that we can cover the several things we have. Yeah. So I'll be continuing from where we just stopped. Give me a moment.
Okay, while you're sharing your screen, please, if you do have questions, kindly write them down somewhere and we will entertain your questions at the end of the class. All right, so we can really get on with the class, and that's because our lecturer has somewhere to be after this class. So we just want to take the whole class session and then we take your question at the end. Thank you.
All right, so very quickly, we'll just continue from where we have stopped. Now, one thing you would do for me, I like to know that everyone is following. I think there are a couple of persons who were here earlier that haven't joined back. So maybe we see how to also get them aware that class has started. So if you can hear me and we're together, just use the icon somewhere and just indicate so I can proceed. Christian, Tribe, Covenant, Jonathan, Opeyemi, Temitayo, just indicate that we're together, then we can go on. All right, Jonathan. I'll be sure that I'm not just speaking because it's possible to have your call on and then you're not in class.
Please indicate either you chat in the chat room that you're here or you can use the reaction button to indicate as well.
All right, Opeyemi is here. You should also get used to having to use those icons you can see on your screen so that I would easily be able to detect. But yeah, moving on, we talked earlier about fundamental rights, which is a component of the Nigerian Constitution, and it encompasses things related to freedom of speech, different beliefs and affiliation, your liberty as a person, your being able to move and being protected despite your movement, and then the fact that children and women have freedom and their rights to welfare, their rights to safety, and everything in between. Now, all of these are necessary for communal equity. They are necessary in terms of transparency and accountability. And it's also important to note that when we have welfare rights embedded in this constitution, it compels investment in youth and mothers, yeah, especially people that are vulnerable. So we have a constitution that makes adequate provision for fundamental human rights. And I would really want to recommend as a person, you need to know what exactly your rights are and if you have access to those rights and how can you demand for those rights when you don't have them or when they are threatened. So moving on, one of the things we look at as a component of the Nigerian constitution are the directive principles. Yeah, directive principles, which of course are seeking to transform Pacman equality. The directive principles within Chapter 2 of the Constitution expand the development duties, yeah, directing state policies towards socioeconomic welfare deliverables. Yeah, this basically is just a part of the Constitution that directs state policies, yeah, on socioeconomic welfare deliverables. Now, it shows how that the state directs resources across different components of societal development for nutrition, for housing, healthcare, access, poverty alleviation, and then amongst every other obligations that the state has. So that is where you find the directive principles. Yeah, that is what it deals with. It will define legislative variables that are actionable, and then it would inject a public interest perspective so that there will be prioritization, yeah, in terms of what the needs per state are. So this is what you have under the directive principle component of the Nigerian
Lauren,
Constitution.
we can't see your screen yet. Are you sharing already?
All right, give me a moment, please.
Okay.
Okay, so my screen has not been up since.
Yes.
All right, just give me a moment, please. And nobody in the class could say you are amazing people. Yeah, so let me, yeah, please confirm that you can see.
Okay. I can see now.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. So we have all of this I just talked about, this as well, which is the directive principle. Now, on the other part, which is a major component of the Nigerian Constitution, is the federal structure. Yeah. Now, this federal structure reserves specific powers for the central, state, and local government. So you have designated powers to the central government, which is of course the federal government. You have powers to the state and federal, and powers rather to the local government. Now, earlier on, we had talked about the roles, responsibility, and powers that each of this arm of government has. So the Constitution provides that also and designates how that this power is distributed across board. Now, the last part of it that we'll look at is the amendment procedures. Yeah, the amendment procedures is just the fact that for every constitution that we've had and the amendments we've made, it goes through rigorous reviews, yeah, before alteration. Now, if you check, and I think one of the students alluded to it on the chat, yeah, it has to go through a rigorous process before it is ratified or amended. Yeah. So, for instance, if you check the Article 9 of the Constitution, now I'm recommending that once again that you have the Nigerian Constitution with you, download it, it's available online, so you can always check out some things there. Now, for any change of such that is constitutional, two-third, there has to be two-third approval at the National Assembly, and then a corresponding ratification has to come from 3/4 of the State House to ensure that there is a level of consensus. Yeah, so at least 3/4 to ensure that there is consensus. And there is an amendment threshold, which is basically supposed to help prevent the governing principles from just political pressures, so that next time, because the thing is, once you change it, it might give an impression that, okay, we can change it next time based on political influences. Yeah. So there is a limit to the amendments that you can actually put. So the threshold is actually set so that we can cushion political pressures and everything in between. And also the threshold gives allowance for having to make amendments over time as the need require. Now, one thing, and interestingly, at the start of the lesson, some of you had mentioned what I look forward to hearing about electioneering processes. And one component of the Nigerian Constitution is definitely the electoral framework. Yeah. Now, you know that within the electoral framework, you have voters' eligibility. Yeah, you know now who are those that are eligible to vote, what determines your being able to vote. Part of it also included are political parties. Yeah, what political parties are there and how do you affiliate to one political party or the other. Also, you have electoral conducts and petitions procedures. Now, all of these things are embedded. Please don't forget my earlier remark about how that this might look maybe a stretch from reality, but these are definitely available and enshrined in the Constitution of Nigeria. Now, this constitution actually invests electoral integrity through transparent appointment of the INEC members. Yeah, so the body that is responsible, like we all know, believe we do, is the INEC, which is the Independent National Electoral Commission. They are appointed independently by the president based on recommendation. Yeah, so you can see that it's not just the president that appoint. It has to come from the recommendation from the Federal Justice Service Commission, along with recommendations from the National Council of States. And this is because at the end of the day, so that you wouldn't say there's a level of partiality or the process was really autonomous, then it has to be recommended from these persons. So the members are chosen across the recommendations made by the FJSC and the NCS. Yeah, you should know that. Now, sorry about that. To foster accountability, time limits are prescribed, yeah, along compulsory tribunal references for resolving electoral outcome disputes. So there are always time limitations to all of these things. You don't just do them whenever. Yeah, they are time bound. So there are specific procedures for how this is done. And this is actually established more detailed in the Nigerian Constitution. Now, the intergovernmental coordination basically shows coordination intergovernment, how that the state government would coordinate with the local government, how that the federal government will coordinate with the state government, what are the levels of communication and coordination that should exist within all those government levels. Yeah, and then you see that they have jurisdiction along vertical agencies. Yeah, so you have healthcare risk, disconnected service, minus binding cooperation mechanisms. All of these are just trying to say that. So at the federal level, you have different arms, of course, the arms of government we have. They are operating from federal level to state government to local level. Now, at these different levels, yeah, there are jurisdiction. You have where you can administer your power. There are confines within which you can administer your power. Now, while the federal level healthcare legislation shapes national priorities, the primary implementation gets decentralized among the 36 state agencies. Yeah, so we have, for instance, the Federal Ministry of Health, but when it comes to its implementation, it then decentralizes its power across the state departments of health. Now, because there has to be a level of coordination, and the same thing applies for other ministries, for instance, education, environment, and related. Yeah, so at the health level now, you now see things like National Council on Health, and then local government service commissions also, which are at the local government. So just imagine that there are efforts that needs to be taken concerning health at the local government level. Those efforts can be taken based on the local government leadership. But efforts from the federal government would still also trickle down to everybody. So this is the way it works. I'll just say this once, and then you can, in your thought process, connect it with every other components of Nigeria's societal development. I'll use the health sector, for instance. Yeah. So there is the Federal Ministry of Health. Yeah, and now there is an allocation that is given to health for a particular year or for a particular term. Now that allocation is given to the federal government, Federal Ministry of Health at that level. Now that allocation would not just be distributed haphazardly. That allocation would have to trickle down to the entire states that we have, and it will be done using the state agencies, which are the state departments of health. Yeah. So it trickles down to the State Department of Health. And if the State Department of Health wants to administer those things in terms of perhaps resource distribution, in terms of funds allocation, in terms of facilities and all of that, the state then distributes it across the local governments. Yeah, and that's why you have national councils on health, you have local government service commission, and the same thing applies for other sectors, yeah, like I had alluded to earlier on. So you notice that. However, this is when it is coming from the federal government. At the state level, for instance, if Lagos State then decides to do something peculiar about the Ministry of Health within Lagos State, Department of Health in Lagos State, the efforts that they will take within Lagos State, they will take it in isolation from every other state because they have the right to also do that. Yeah, so they can also put in measures to address health challenges just within Lagos State. Now, they will do that in addition to their own allocation all the way from the federal government. Yeah, so you can see that. Will they get the fair share from the federal government? Yes. Are they at will to do extra based on their own allocation within the state? Yes. Now, same thing applies also to local government. If a local government decides to bring up strategies that would favor primary healthcare centers, and then they put it in addition to the allocation that they get from state government, good for them, double advantage. Would they get from state government? Yes, they are supposed and expected to get. Now, can they also take measures to improve their own healthcare and strategy? Yes, they can. So this is how intergovernmental coordination actually works. And then we should know. Now, what are the advantages of the Nigerian Constitution, the 1999 Constitution? What are the merits that we have? Now, the federal structure devolves significant powers to subnational states. Yeah, hence it enables localized governance. But of course, you see all of these things. First off, you need to know what is obtainable in the Constitution. Then secondly, we can now start having interactions on these things are obtainable in the Constitution. How well are they being implemented? How well are they being imputed in different cross sections and sectors of Nigeria's development? These are conversations you can now have that can bring up your own individualized perspectives, yeah, of which some of them we've talked about when we're talking about having need for perhaps decentralized form of policing, having need for several decentralized things, which of course can exist. And that's why we can begin to engage these issues here, such as the benefits that we are seeing. Because if the conversation is part of the benefits is that we decentralize power, then if we've decentralized power, why then aren't we having policing at state level and every other conversation in between? But know that one of the benefits is the fact that power is decentralized from the federal down to subnational, ensuring that governance at the local level would benefit from contextual knowledge and then closer citizen oversight, meaning they decentralize power such that they don't operate with assumptions. At least if a particular allocation from the Ministry of Health trickles down to the states understand their priorities, yeah, the state understand their needs, and then they can disseminate that across to local governments. In the same vein, the local government better understand their local context and understand their priorities, and as well in that modality dispense whatever it is that the allocation was made for to serve the needs and priorities of the people at the time. Another benefit is about the Independent Electoral Commission. They uphold rights like universal franchise, multi-party elections, and judicial petition mechanisms just to strengthen the electoral integrity. So it is not independent based on just fancy words. It's independent because it is non-partisan. And as well, they get to uphold rights like universal franchise, multi-party elections, and judicial petition like we had from the past election, just so that they will strengthen the integrity of the electoral process. Thirdly, another advantage. Now, this is not the limit to the benefits of the Nigerian Constitution. So you can as well interact with people. You can as well make your findings online to understand the Nigerian Constitution better and its benefit. Now, the separation of power across the judiciary, executive, and legislature creates checks and balances, because that is the idea behind it here. If the executive are actually misbehaving in court, there is a mechanism to checkmate them. Yeah, same for every other of these components. Yeah, so they were created to ensure checks and balances and to constrain abuse. Yeah, and so you now have something like the Independent National Human Rights Commission that was formed in that regard. But we cannot alone just talk about the benefits. We can also look at the demerits. Yeah. What are the disadvantages that we have seen over time of the Nigerian constitution? After my 3 points, I would ask somebody in the class to share with me what they consider one disadvantage of theirs. Yeah. So one of the disadvantage, one of the demerits is that there is this overstretched concurrent jurisdiction across governance level. Yeah. And it risks coordination gaps despite the shared healthcare, education, environment, etc., and supervision amidst legislative implementation disconnections. Yeah. What that basically means is that because concurrent jurisdiction, don't forget what I mean when I say concurrent powers and concurrent jurisdiction. Yeah. Now, when the national government and the state government can do the same thing, yeah, at the end of the day, you can see oftentimes and not, it now looks as though they are waiting for, okay, who wants to do something and who wants to take the lead in doing it, and at the same time, who wants to ensure that that thing is done. So coordination now becomes a problem. Supervision also now becomes a problem. And when that happens, implementation of all of those things also creates a form of problem. Yeah, so that's one thing we have, especially with the concurrent powers. Now, you also, secondly, that the concentrated amendment threshold requirement and procedures have actually hampered periodic updates, realigning systems to evolving community expectations. And this is part of what we were talking about earlier on. Yeah, so there is a threshold, meaning there is a limit to the required amendment, yeah, that is being done. And as such, when there is a limit, as things begin to evolve, it won't be easy for them to just, or for us as a country to just modify our existing constitution. And that's because there is a threshold existing already. Now, the threshold has its advantage, meaning that we wouldn't, at least at any point in time, begin to experience political discontinuity, yeah, such that can now lead to political instability. But in spite of that advantage, it still poses a limit because we cannot always modify this constitution. We would have to wait over time before we can realign the constitution with what is obtainable currently and what people or individuals like you and me and communities expect. Yeah, so it becomes a problem. Another thing which is an disadvantage is the fiscal dependence of states on federal allocation. It reduces self-sustenance, yeah, and it also affects executing locally conceptualized transformation schemes. Now, this is one big problem. Yeah, and I would like to hear more from us while I just quickly explain this. Just one person is fine. You can just unmute and speak. So this is basically saying that in terms of finance, state government is primarily dependent on the federal to give allocations before they can do things meaningfully to address their problems. Yeah. Meanwhile, at the local level, they can see their problems, they understand it, and they can come up with transformative ideas. Unfortunately, they still have to wait for resources from the federal to now be able to use them. And over time, they might not be able to use the resources for their own priorities, given the allocation that was made available to them. So these are some of the advantages and demerits of the Nigerian Constitution. So let me hear from anybody. Do you want to talk about one other disadvantage of the Nigerian Constitution? Okay, this is from Kristen. Sometimes it brings conflict of interest. Yes, interesting. Yes, sometimes it does because you have the federal government allocation meant for something, and then at the state level rather, they think they have other priorities that needs to be addressed. So there comes a conflict of interest between the federal priority and then the state priorities in terms of implementation. Yeah, who else? What disadvantage or demerit? Okay, Shwai.
One of the disadvantage I could say is that it bring what's it called among the misinterpretation of law. That is the repetition of law. That is the same law that the federal government make, and also the state also make. So it bring the reinterpretation of the law between the state and the federal.
Okay. Yeah, I think yeah, I understand your point. It's on the part of the citizen. I believe that disadvantage you're talking about, because citizens will then begin to misconstrue the law, because at some point you're really not sure if you are abiding by the federal law or you are abiding by the state law when you're in a particular place part time, and you don't even know
Exactly.
if the state law is conflicting against the federal law. I get your point well. So yes, it happens that way. That can also be a demerit. So who else want to say something? Okay, that's fine. Let's just proceed. We've had those contributions from Kristen and contributions from Schweib. I don't know, somehow I'm just taking note of people who are making contributions in my class. And yeah, so moving on, we just go back to sharing. Yes, moving on, the rule of law. The rule of law. When you hear the rule of law, what do you, what comes to mind? What does it mean to you? The rule of law. And these are like four major components you must know. Yeah. One, equality under the law. We are all equal under the law. Transparency of the law. The law has to be transparent. Third, independent judiciary. The judiciary is not expected to be partisan. The judiciary is expected to be independent and of its own. And lastly, accessible legal remedy. For everything, access to the law to address concerns must be available. Yeah, so those are like the four components you should know. And you can see at the core of this conversation is the fact that no one is above the law. Yeah, including those who come out and will say, do you know who I am? Anyway, even if they get to say that, no one is actually above the law. And the law is applied equally and fairly. And these are like the components that characterizes all of these things. It's fair and then has to be prompt in trials. There's separation of powers between the legislature, executive, and then judiciary. You know, those three arms of government. And then you have people can only be punished in accordance with the law. And these are things that you should know. And maybe because I'm saying this now, I allude to, you see, some of us celebrate jungle justice and you taking decisions into your hands. Yeah. People should and only be punished in accordance with the law. You don't take laws into your hands because somebody did something and then you think you can judge the person or met out a judgment on the person. That's wrong. Yeah. People can only be punished in accordance with the law. The law and its administration is subject and open to free criticism, rather. Sorry about that. So it means that in the course of engagement, yeah, there will be cases, and you know, here I talked about accessible legal remedy. Yeah. So we bring up issues and then we want to resolve it in the court of law. And then different decisions are reached whatsoever the law says, and however that law is being administered is subject to open and free criticism. You have the right to air your view and opinion about a particular law and about the way it is administered. Next up, the law is known and accessible. So if you don't know the law, yeah, there is no excuse for ignorance. Yeah, so you should take note of that. Presumption of innocence. Yeah, the law presumes innocence. And that's why they say that you're not guilty until you have been tried and found guilty. Yeah? So everyone is innocent until they've been tried and found guilty. And that typically when you are in court arrested, nothing is supposed to be done to you. No harm is supposed to be meted out at you. No form of violence or physical assault is expected. You're just supposed to be arrested, taken in for questioning, and then you go through, of course, legal processes until when you have been declared guilty according to the law is when you can now face certain consequences of whatever action it is that have been carried out. And sometimes it's our ignorance of the law that makes us predisposed to certain things. You are innocent until having been tried and found guilty. Now, the law is also expected to be open, independent, and impartial, especially in terms of its judiciary. The judiciary is not to be partisan and should be impartial. So no retrospective laws should be made. The law is abiding and needs no retrospects. Laws are made in an open and transparent way by the people. And then lastly, government agencies to behave as model litigants. Yeah, so law agencies are the ones who, the government agencies rather, are the ones who should uphold and be model litigants even for the law, stand by the law, uphold the law, live the law, and ensure that the law is being enforced. And that's the summary of what that is talking about. So you should know that about the rule of law. Possibly after the class, I could ask anybody of my choosing, what are the 6 things you can tell me about the rule of law? What are the 9 things you can tell me about the rule of law? What do you think about the law, which is also a component of the Constitution? Yeah. So quickly move on to what's next. Understanding the federal system of government in Nigeria. Understanding the federal system of government in Nigeria. So first off, what exactly is a federation? It's a political organization that bring together several states or regional territories under a central authority. In the case of Nigeria, this means that we have 36 states, an administrative state, all of which is led and governed by a central authority. And that's why you hear that we have the Federal Capital Territory, because that is where the administration of the entire 36 states emanates from. So in a federation, governance functions get constitutionally divided between overarching federal bodies looking after national matters like, so good. So we have, and this is just for you to understand, yeah, we have the federal government, we have the Federation of Nigeria, yeah, Nigeria as a federation. Now, considering these bodies, the Federation of Nigeria needs to have subsidiary bodies to be able to administer governance and structure across different components of society. Yeah. And that's why when it comes to interactions with other countries or international affairs, we need to have a ministry and an office or a federal body that is in charge of foreign affairs. In terms of security and protections of lives and properties of the Nigerian citizens, we also need to have another federal body that is known as, or that is responsible for defense. In this case, we have the Ministry of Defense, we have Minister of Defense. Now, in terms of currency, we need to have a body that is responsible for that at the central level, a body and an organization responsible for that. And that is why you have federal organizations, such like you have the Central Bank of Nigeria responsible. So those bodies have been organized based on the provision of the Constitution for Nigeria as a federation. Yeah. At the same time, at the state level, once these components also have to be addressed, they also need to be addressed across designated bodies such as law enforcement, transport, and healthcare, amongst several others. So these are the things you should know. And then there is also the shared rule that mandates power sharing and cooperation, some of which, of course, have disadvantages that we have touched on earlier on. Now, what are the difference between a federation and a confederation? Yeah. Now, for a federation, in terms of citizenship, there might be double citizenship in a federation as individual states come together to create a new state. For instance, in the United States, people have double citizenship. In other words, residents in the state of New York have both American and New York citizenship. Meanwhile, in a confederation is not a new state and therefore cannot have citizens. Yeah. all individuals are confederate, are citizens rather, of their confederate state, but they do not acquire additional citizenship. Your citizenship remains with you based on the state that you are in, despite being a part of a confederation. Now, all confederate states, in terms of finance now, in terms of the currency, all confederate states keep their currency as there is no intention to create a unitary budget or a common currency. Yeah. So if you are a part of a confederation, you keep your individual currency, you keep your individual citizen. Now, I'll give you an example. Let's talk about citizenship. In Nigeria here, when you get to Rivers, no matter where you're from, you are a Nigerian. When you get to Kano, you are a Nigerian. When you get to Lagos, Ogun State, Osun, Akwa Ibom, Cross River, you are in Nigeria. And that is the citizenship that is valid to every one of us as part of the Federation of Nigeria. In terms of country and currency rather, wheresoever it is I get to, I spend the Naira within Nigeria, mind you. Wherever it is I get to within the Federation of Nigeria, I spend the Naira. So all member states use the same country. So as a federation, every state uses the same Naira. And these are like some of the differences that we have in terms of federation and confederation. Now, you have other differences. Federation will give rise to a new sovereign state, yes, and confederation means the sovereignty of the member states remains intact. Yeah. So even if I know some of you might be familiar with the history of Nigeria and of course the amalgamation, and the moment after the amalgamation, when Nigeria then became a federal republic, then it became a federation, and at that point in time, all things had to be unified. So we became a sovereign state. Yeah, united by all things, our currency, our citizenship, and everything in between. So those are like some of the things you should know. Confederation has no separate laws, whereas federation has separate laws. Federation is more stable than confederation. That's one of the advantages you should know. Then the purpose of confederation is limited. So in terms of sovereignty, for confederation, it is definitely held by member state. So if we are a confederation, then perhaps Niger, for instance, can choose to do whatever it is they want to do without being held accountable. At least their own sovereignty is in themselves. But as a nation, our own sovereignty is held by this federal government. And so the federal government holds the ultimate authority, and then other states will just be subordinate to it as a federation. Now, what then are the functions of the federal system in Nigeria, and how does this relate with the 3 tiers of government that we have? Now, at the federal government level, these are things I want to quickly put out there for you to read through. So I might not just say anything now, just watch you go through the document. So here you have seen the roles, the responsibilities, and the jurisdiction of the different tier of government, different levels of government right now, federal, state, and local. Just go through them so that you can see what each agency actually does. Okay, good. Moving on, I will just quickly ask, you can just unmute and give me a quick question. In terms of, because we now have state governments, we now have federal governments, we have local government. How do you think finance, in terms of salaries, as it were, how do you think the payment of salaries work across these levels of government for people working in the government? How does that actually work? Anybody, you could just raise your hand, you could speak. payment of salaries for those in the federal government, for those working in the state government, and yeah, over to you, Richard.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. I joined in late because of my network and my gadget was acting up. So I want
No,
to
no
attempt to
worries.
answer the question. How does payment of salary works? So if someone is a government worker, for instance, it depends on the level you are in. Either you are a federal government worker, a state worker, or a local government worker. So as far as you are employed to work with the government, the instruction comes from the federal government to pay your salary. So irrespective of the level of you find yourself. So if you are employed as a government worker, the federal government of Nigeria is in charge of paying your salary. Then with the table you share, I want to ask a question. I saw that payment of salary falls under local government. Does that mean that it's the local government that's paying all across board, all the both state worker and federal worker? Because it's not so in my opinion. Maybe the money is being gotten from local government, or can you expatiate more on that, sir?
All right, thank you very much. And I think I really I intentionally asked that question so that I would get your opinions on this. Good. So you said here for local governments we have payment of salaries. Yeah. So I'll maybe just quickly do a brief illustration. Yeah. At the federal government, some of these things we would get to see them moving on. This is all right. Good. Now this part of it. Yeah, you can see here that the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation is one thing you also want to note as part of the constituted bodies in Nigeria. The Office of the Accountant General of the Federation is responsible for the overall management of all receipts and payment of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It has the responsibility for providing comprehensive accounting systems and controls in the ministries, extra ministerial departments, and agencies. Yeah. Now, the way this works is this. The Office of the Accountant General serves the entire Federal Republic of Nigeria. Yeah, serves the Federal Republic of Nigeria in the sense that there are existing structures that have been made, and the dissemination of salaries, for instance, the payment of salaries work across these structures that have been made available by the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. And I don't know how many of you recollect, there was one time there was a conversation on having to use IPPIS to pay salaries of government workers and different conversations in between. Yeah. Now, these systems are decided upon and trickles down from the federal government. Yeah. So you can be sure that directly from the federal government, people who work with the federal government of Nigeria get their pay, of course, from the Office of the Accountant General. Now, because the Accountant General and from there only have direct access with federal parastatals, yeah, they also need contributions from state government in terms of modalities, in terms of structure, in terms of organization. So they work together with state government to decide how this payment structure gets to now reach the different state parastatals. Yeah. So it's at their discretion and deliberations with the different states that the money gets to trickle down. Yeah. And one of the things that the IPPIS then wanted to do was so that we can have a unifying paying system that just trickles down from the Office of the Accountant General all the way down to those working for the state government and even people working at local government level. But oftentimes than not, why you have that payment of salary designated as part of the local government is that those who work within the local government, oftentimes are not, do not get, for instance, let me be very practical, they don't receive credit alerts and say, okay, their salary just came in from maybe the Office of the Accountant General or something. Oftentimes are not. They get paid based on the allocation that have been made towards the local government, and that's how their payment structure is facilitated. But overall, just know that anybody who works with the government and is being paid, it trickles down from this particular office, which is the office of the Accountant General of the Federation. And then following every other structures that trickles down to state level, the same funds are being communicated. So there is no one fixed structure about it, but yes, it all boils down from the office of the Accountant General of the Federation. But then there is one other thing that you should actually know in terms of allocations of funds. Yeah. So there is a formula, and this is a formula you might want to take note of. So we allocate 52.68 to the federal level, 26.72 to the state level, and 20.60% to the local government level, respectively. Yeah. Now for the 26 and then the 20 that accrues to state and local government is now shared by other factors. Yeah. So to share that, they apply factors such as equality, population, land mass, internally generated revenue, and social development. So what this means is we all know Nigeria is a federation. We have a centralized body such that the revenue gotten is agglomerated and then distributed here. So this is the percentage for allocation and distribution. Yeah, allocation for federal, state, and local government. Now, good. This is one thing you should also know. Revenue allocation formula. When the money is gotten, when the revenue, for instance, federal revenue now wants to be allocated, this is how it is allocated. But in addition to this, there is now, of course, an extra allocation when it comes to mineral revenue. Yeah, revenue gotten from exploration of minerals. Yeah, so you know Nigeria has different mineral resources distributed across different states, for example. Yeah, so I would use rivers, Rivers State, as an example in this case. So quickly see this section 162, subsection 2 of the Constitution provides for the distribution of an amount not less than 13% of the revenue accruing, blah, blah, blah. What that is basically telling you is that when it comes to revenue gotten from mineral exploration, at least 13% extra is given to the state where that mineral was mined. Yeah, so these are like things that you should know. For instance, the state government should be aware of, so that when they receive their general revenue, they still request for their derivation. Yeah, because they need a revenue that comes to them because the mineral was gotten from their state. Now you can see that that sharing formula now differs. It's like a percentage has been subtracted from the earlier 3 versions and then accrued to 13% that will be given to the state. So for instance, River States now, at the end of the day, there is allocation made to them. They've received their own percentage of the federal revenue. But in addition to that percentage that they've gotten, they will get extra 13% that is allocated to them because that revenue was actually gotten from their own state. Now that revenue can now be used to meet other extra demands and maybe even cushion the effects that comes from the mineral exploration within those states. Next thing we want to talk about now is the importance of you and what exactly are the constitutional rights and obligations of the Nigerian citizens. I think one person who had mentioned her interest in knowing this, I don't think I can see her on the call right now, Timmy if I'm right, where we are talking about what we're looking forward to. Yeah, so you have to know your constitutional rights and obligations as a Nigerian citizen. Yeah. Maybe before I move on, just very quickly, I think this is where I'll do a sample of everyone in class. I know we have limited time, but I want to ensure that we are all participating. What are your rights? What are your rights? Okay, since Richard has been opening the floor so far, I'll call Richard. After Richard, Glory, I would call you. So you either type in the chat or be ready to speak. After Glory, I would call Felishayo. After Felishayo, Ajayi. So note that. So Richard, what are your rights? Just mention
Okay,
two the most.
okay, I have right of movement, right to vote.
All right, thank you very much for that.
Please, sir,
Right to
before that, I wanted to ask a question about the salary payment method. You mentioned the IP, what is it called again?
IBPIs, for
IP.
instance.
Yes. I really didn't know that it was already in effect, because the only idea I had about it was that ASU rejected it when the federal government was to enforce it. They said they don't want that form of payment. So that was the only idea I have to know about. I got to know about that payment method, but I didn't know that other parastatals of government have started using it. I think this is a great learning point for me. But can
Yeah.
you shed more light on the reason why ASU is declining to use it? Is it because maybe it will cut on their, maybe they are working elsewhere, they don't want to be caught being paid twice, thrice, or something like that? Is that the reason why they are trying to avoid that?
All right, all right.
Sorry
Thank you
to
very much for that.
go into
Yeah,
class.
it's okay. I would address that. I'll touch on that really soon. I think me just drop something in the chat. Rights of freedom. Okay, you build yourself one out. So Glory, what rights do you want to mention? Glory, one or two rights? Yes, please.
Right to life.
Sorry, I didn't get that. You're low, very low.
Right to life. Right to life.
You're speaking, but I can't hear you. But that's fine, no problem. Right of speech, I can see in the chat. Rights to be religious, that's precise. Feyi Shayo. Odejide.
Hello, sir. Am I audible now?
All
Couldn't hear
right,
you.
you're audible now. Yes, please.
Okay. I said I have right to life.
Right to learn. Yeah, good. Maybe that's the reason why you're in class. And what?
Sorry?
Yeah, please go on. And what?
Okay. The one the lawyers usually say, right to be presumed innocent until I am proven guilty by a court of law.
Perfect. That's profound. I established that earlier on in the rule of law. If you had followed through, you see that. So that's very correct. Okay, I think Felicia is not in this class, so just not with us. So we just proceed. I've seen some interesting responses also in the chat. Right of association, yeah, that's very true. Right to be religious and to be part of different religious as you please, religious affiliations, right to freedom, right to freedom of speech too. So those are like some of your rights. It's interesting, at least you know your right. But much more. Let's just go through this together. Now you've talked about your rights. Now, with your rights comes responsibilities and duties. Yeah. So now you've known the things that you should have access to as a citizen of Nigeria. But what are your own responsibilities? What is expected that you should do? Respect the ideals of the Constitution and every institution associated. You need to know the ideals and expect it. Yeah. Respect the national flag, respect the national pledge, and respect legitimate authorities. Now, it is your responsibility also to enhance the power, prestige, and good name of Nigeria. And hence, if somebody goes out and is talking ill of your country, perhaps to an international audience, that is not quite a responsibility. Now, if these are your responsibilities, someone who does otherwise basically just points in a particular direction. I don't really want to say that to you, but you can connect the dots. Now, it's also your right to respect the dignity of other citizens, and it is their rights rather. Respect other citizens, respect their dignity, and respect their rights. Promote the spirit of common brotherhood and good neighborliness. These are our responsibilities. in society, you are to make positive and useful contribution to the advancement, progress, and well-being of community of residents. Yeah, where you stay, promote the well-being, promote progress, and make useful contribution. Render assistance to agencies to make sure that law and order is maintained. So you do that by reporting crimes, you report, make complaints, and you've been seeing that even, for instance, in Lagos State, working where a couple of people report pollution, a couple of people report noise pollution, particularly. You can also report criminal activities. In fact, some persons are considered whistleblowers. So these are responsibilities and duties of the Nigerian citizens. Now, what are the important functions of the constituted authority? Yeah, so we have constituted authorities here in Nigeria. So what are their functions? The most important function of the constitutional authorities is to ensure the fundamental rights of its citizens. So you see, all of those things that you've mentioned about your rights, these constituted authorities are very responsible to ensure that you have all of those rights. Yeah. So if one day you wake up and then you are no longer safe within your country, then it is the responsibility of the constituted authority in charge of defense and security to ensure that if one day you wake up and you really don't have access to learning, or you don't even have freedom of speech, then you are being deprived of your rights. Yeah. So it is now the function and the responsibility of these constituted authorities to see that your fundamental rights are met and you have them available to you. Now, they are also responsible for laying out the procedures for several administrations. I cannot overflow this to tell you who does what and where part time. Yeah, who does what where part time. Now, a set of basic rules are actually provided by these authorities to maintain the harmony of society. If you drive in any state in Nigeria, you will know that there are laid down rules when you're driving. Now, those rules have been developed either by the state agency responsible for traffic, whatever control. Yeah, if you of course, within the Nigeria Federation as well, there are rules that have been laid down that should help you to maintain law and order. For instance, in Lagos, you have LOMA that will give you rules in terms of waste management and disposal. You have LASEPA, so that one morning you wouldn't just wake up and see that your gate has been locked, or you just find a particular sign that tells you that you have infringed on a particular right or on a particular law, as it were. You've contravened the law. So our awareness of these things help us to know. So, for instance, at state level, what's LASEPA saying about noise pollution? At environmental pollution level, what's LOMA saying about waste management? For instance, in Lagos, what exactly exists federal-wise in terms of environmental regulations, rather, what regulations exist that bind your activities in the environment? Because imagine you just wake up one day and you got arrested. Permit me to just make light, and you will see things like, mi ò ṣe kankan, mi ò ṣe kankan, mi ò ṣe kankan. Meanwhile, you have flouted the law because you've done something that you aren't supposed to do. But the problem is most likely that you were not aware, and that most times doesn't work. There is no pardon for you based on ignorance. Yeah. So you need to know what the laid down principles exist here by these authorities. Now, the specification of who makes decisions in the society lies in the hands of the constitutional authorities. So they have been assigned or designated powers. They also further decentralize the powers to certain people who definitely need, and that's the importance of leadership. So power comes all the way. The constitution has been made available. We have the different levels of government, and then even within the local level, we still have community development associations. We have chairmans of those associations. At the grassroots level, we have youth leaders, we have community heads, we have baales, even in some Yoruba communities. You have kings who also interact at different levels of authorities. because that is how society is supposed to work. Now, these authorities definitely limit the government to impose decisions on citizens. So hence, the government themselves doesn't necessarily have to be the one doing everything, because at least now we have other constituted authorities that can do all of those jobs. We have those on the road monitoring traffic. We have those that are monitoring noise pollution, the collection of waste bins and everything in between. Now, they also encourage the government to fulfill citizens' aspirations. Yeah, they definitely reach out to the government to help them realize the concerns of the average Nigerian citizen and see how those things are being addressed. So we move on to responsibilities and duties of the government to people. Quickly, I would not bother reading or explaining the slides to us. I'll just ask us again. So once we mention them, we'll just move on to the next slide. So what are the responsibilities or the duties of the government to you as a citizen? What does the government owe you? What does the government do for you, or what should they do to you as a citizen or for you? Yeah, Richard. Meanwhile, I remember your question and I'll definitely address it moving on. But yes, what is the responsibility of the government towards you?
Okay. Oh,
Yes,
okay.
please.
The government has various such as light, water, good road, and a lot more. Those are the one I can remember now.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think that's also in tandem with what Jonathan has just shared in the chat. Who else? Christian, what are the responsibilities of the government to you? Otegu Paul, Shraib, I've not heard from you since too. I think one person that has just been in this class but I've not heard anything from is Covenant Jeffrey. Yeah, Paul.
I think the responsibility of government is to provide a good healthcare and good education.
All right, good healthcare and good education. Thank you for that. That's profound. We have provision of basic amenities in the chat. I think Christian is also chatting. Now that's very correct. So we'll just continue with the presentation so you can see much more here. These are the responsibilities of the government and people. They are even expected to protect your lives and properties. Yeah, they're supposed to promote democracy. They're supposed to provide social welfare services. It's the government that should promote economic development. So you can hold the government responsible for all of these things. Yeah. And this is the reason why you learn about the Constitution. This is the reason you learn about your rights as a citizen. If the government does not ensure that law and order is being maintained, then you can advocate for it. You can call their attention to it through legal means that have been established within the confines of the law. To do that, you can request accountability. If you feel that your lives and properties are threatened, you can, of course, report the situation. You can protest about it. You can air your concern. Yeah, so these are like responsibilities that the government or the people, providing social welfare amenities and every other thing in between. And yes, the government is supposed to provide a friendly environment for your business to thrive. As a business person, thinking business, doing business, the government is supposed to provide a very conducive and suitable environment for a business to thrive and also provide employment opportunities. Now, citizenships. What are the principles and benefits of citizenship? Yeah. One, being recognized as a citizen of a country has many legal benefits, which may include, depending on the country, the right to vote, to hold public office, the right to social security, to health services, to public education, to permanent residency, to own a land, or to engage in employment, among others. Now, many of us have overseen or maybe just have had these oversights about the benefits that we actually enjoy as citizens. One thing you should know, and I think it's applicable in Nigeria, Of course, you have the right to vote. Like they would say, you have the right to choose your leaders. Yeah.
To vote
So as
and
a
be voted
citizen,
for.
yeah, exactly. That's the phrase itself. Right to vote and to be voted for. I think that's the exact way it's even written in the Constitution. When you find your fundamental rights, you find it there. You see, you have the right to vote and to be voted for. You have the right to hold public office. Yeah, if you think that's where your career trajectory is leading you towards, you have the right to hold public office. You have the right to social security. Yeah, if you need social security in all ramifications, you have the rights to that. You have the right to health services. The reason you can walk into a primary healthcare facility or just walk into even some state healthcare facility that have been established to meet health demand. Just walk in there. Perhaps you need a card or something. As a citizen, you'll be administered some healthcare services. Yeah, at quite a discounted rate, of course, because you are a citizen. So these are part of the benefits. You have access to public education. Some of us are a product of public education within the Nigerian system, both secondary school and university level and even post-university level. Yeah, you attend a federal university because at the time when I was attending a federal university, school fee then, I think I paid both school fee and accommodation for less than 50,000 naira. Yeah, way less than 50,000 naira for school fee and accommodation as a citizen. Yeah. Now these are the things you have access to as a citizen within the country. But if I were to school elsewhere, or maybe even school in a private parastatal, I definitely would have to pay way much more than that. So you see how these things work. You have access also to permanent residency. You can choose where you want to live, and you can live till you don't live anymore within your country as a citizen. Yeah, you have the right to own a land. Yeah, so wherever you are, in fact, some people right now are beginning to own lands in places where they were not necessarily born in, and in places where they they are not even indigents of those places here, but they own lands there, they own properties, they own businesses. These are things you enjoy as a citizen of a country. You can engage in and you can also be employed as a citizen, among several other benefits that comes to you as a citizen. So you can think around these things. What other benefits are there to being a citizen of Nigeria? Now, the principles of Nigerian citizenship you should know. Now, there is this thing in law that is called jus sanguinis, yeah, which means by birth. That's one primary way that you earn this Nigerian citizenship. Yeah, your Nigerian nationality is typically obtained under the principle of jus sanguinis, that is, by birth to parents with Nigerian nationality. So once you're born of Nigerian parents, you apparently are of Nigerian descent and you have the Nigerian nationality. Yeah. Now, it is granted also to persons with an affiliation to the country or to a permanent resident who have lived in the country long enough. I'll show you three different ways here in which a citizenship in Nigeria can be gotten. Sorry about that. Now, being a recognized citizen of the country has many legal benefits, yeah, which, of course, depending on the country, would include all of those things I shared earlier on. And now, what are the modes to acquire citizenship in Nigeria? First off, like I said, just on Junis based on birth. Yeah. Now, there's also citizenship by place of birth. Yeah. This applies to persons born in Nigeria or abroad, so at least one Nigerian citizen parent, you become a citizen of Nigeria. And I think that's how majority of us on this call are actually citizens of Nigeria. We are either born in Nigeria or also born by parents who are Nigerians. There is also citizenship by registration. Now, this happens when, for instance, I'm a Nigerian and I'm married to a lady that is from the United States of America, and then we relocated down to Nigeria. And apparently, she has her own Nigerian citizenship by registration, and the fact that she's married to a Nigerian citizen. And this basically is what we refer to as citizenship by registration. And there is also citizenship that for non-citizens, for those who come in and then they've resided in the country for about 15 years, yeah, and then maybe they get adapted into the culture and processes within the country, and maybe by evidence can even speak a local language. Then when you have a good report of having lived in peace for 15 years without conflict, without having criminal cases or what have you, then you can register as a citizen. Yeah, there is, and this is also related to citizenship by naturalization. Now, there are foreigners who come into the country who just choose to live in the country. I'll give you instances. Some of them can come for research purposes, yeah. And then research takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Even when they are done, they don't think they are enjoying the country, and then they stay longer. Now, once they get to that point, then they can file for citizenship. For at least 10 years, they must have resided. Yeah, now that is by naturalization. It's like a natural process. I came into the country and then I've been able to naturalize that into the whole system. And here I am now wanting to become a member of the country, a citizen of the country. Such a person must have demonstrated good character, a level of commitment to the nation, and of course, competence in at least a native language and having been assimilated into the culture of the people. So this is how citizenship is actually acquired in Nigeria. I've talked about citizen by registration earlier on. Then you can have dual citizenship. Yeah, for somebody who married a foreigner, yeah, the person has both her foreign status and Nigerian citizenship. Yeah, that applies also to a couple other countries likewise. Now, some other countries have agreements, yeah, based on treaty. Yeah. If you are born in a country that has an agreement based on treaty with other countries, then automatically you have dual citizenship. It's just unfortunate I can't remember an example right now. But if you're born into a particular country and that country has a binding treaty with another country or other countries, it means that you're a citizen of your country and a citizen of those other countries with which there is a treaty binding them. Now, what are the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy in Nigeria? State policy in Nigeria. Now, obligations of government as provided in the Constitution. Security and welfare of the citizen. Okay, I would call somebody. Can you just explain what it means when they said the obligation of the government is security and welfare of the citizens? Who do I see in class? There are some people who had the knowledge of being called, they disappear. I've seen a couple of them disappear a few times. But yes, let's start with who hasn't spoken. I'm coming to you, Richard. I want to hear. Okay, Paul spoke. Yeah, Paul. Yeah, what does it mean when we say that security and welfare of citizens is an obligation of the government? Yeah, Paul, go on. You're
Hello, sir.
unmuted, but I can. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I don't understand the question, sir.
Yeah, the question is that what does it mean when they say that one obligation of the government is security and welfare of the citizen? What does that mean?
Okay, from my own understanding, is like the the priority of the government, like what the government can offer to the citizens, like as like the how am I going to explain it? But like the priority, one of the priority of the government to the people is the security and the welfare of the people. I think let me use that priority because I'm looking for the word to use. That's what I understand about that.
All right, thank you very much for that. Okay, Oluwapelumi Ajayi, what does it mean when we say the obligation of the government? One of the obligations of the government is security and welfare of citizens. Oluwapelumi Ajayi. Who else wants to try? Aside Richard, I can see Richard's hand.
Yeah, I want to try, sir.
All right. All right, please go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, sir. What we mean by that, according to me, to my own understanding, is that it is the responsibility of the government to cater for the welfare of the citizen, that is the citizen of the country. For instance, security-wise, in the case of kidnapping, terrorism recently in Nigeria, so the government was saddled with the responsibility of providing us security because as individuals, we are not armed. We are not like the military people that are armed with gun or anything to defend ourselves. So we are practically defenseless. So it's the responsibility of the government to protect us as citizens against terrorists, against bandits, even against foreign for instance, if there's war. So the government recruit the soldier, the military, the police to protect us. Then in the term of welfare, for instance, road construction, individuals can't tar the entire road of maybe a state, even their street. It's very expensive. It's costly. So the government comes in that, construct road, give us potable water, network services, and a lot more welfare in general. That's what I
Yeah,
understand
thank
by
you.
that question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Richard. Thank you very much for that. So one of the things I want to draw your attention to. Yeah, please, who's that?
Yes, it's Temitayo on the line.
Yeah. You were the one who answered the question very early in the beginning. Yeah, please go on.
Yes, I just wanted to add with what I think Richard just finished speaking, that I think it's a symbiotic relationship. The government, we're counted amongst the GDP, especially if we're in the working class. We're numbered, okay, I'm a Nigerian. So when the nation owes us something, as much as we owe the nation something, so for whatever makes us called a Nigerian, that means they must provide those basic things, like he has said, security, roads, and basic amenities that will make it easy for us to live in the country that we call our own, while we pay taxes, while we contribute to the upward movement of the nation. So the government is expected to provide. In some economies, we've got all the housing, we've got when people don't work, what they're entitled to. When you're a senior citizen, what you're entitled to. So those are the things that the country is expected to do for us, while we in our own working class state, they bill us. We pay taxes, we contribute. So that's what I just wanted to add to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's very profound. Yeah, I appreciate your contribution. Like we had earlier alluded to in class, this is not just a one-way thing, and that's why the Constitution is all-encompassing. By that, I mean that in it is indicated what you should do and what you're expected to do as an individual, and also in it is what the government is expected to do for you as an individual and as a citizen of the country. So note that as much as, because oftentimes I'm not, maybe I'll just take a step back and amplify one of the things that Temitayo has just said. Oftentimes I'm not, we are emphatic about what the government should do, and we pay little attention to what we as individuals should do, which is actually part of our rights and responsibilities. So we enjoy the rights, or we expected to enjoy the rights, and we also expected to enjoy the benefits. Much more than that, we expected to pay forward with our own responsibility, our own commitment. And if you had followed through the lecture earlier on, I gave you instances of how that a citizen should be responsible, and what are the things that a responsible citizen of Nigeria would actually do to contribute to the development and progress of the country. Now, the emphasis I wanted to make with this point, that I would appreciate if members of the class would, rather than myself explain it, just explain what is left to be good so that we can access our level of learning, is that by obligations, it is meaning they have to do it. They have to, like, it's a must. You are obligated to. So that's like the emphasis I really wanted us to make. The obligations rather of government as provided by the Constitution. So the Constitution made it compulsory that the government must provide security and welfare for citizens. I'll give you a number of examples. If a flood disaster actually occurs, given the situation perhaps in Lagos or in Bayelsa, for instance, if it happens, of course, your life is at risk, your properties are also at risk, but the people responsible for immediate response to that particular unfortunate occasion are the government, are people in government. They are the ones that need to send a form of rescue, make provision for shelter, and make provision for feeding in that particular situation where something dastardly as a disaster had just happened. Now, in terms of security, you hear of a couple of things related to insurgency in Nigeria and related. It is not our responsibility as just citizens to be able to address that. So the government must. And that's why you see advocates on the news, you see advocates publishing different reports and saying things like the government must, because they must. So you should know that your security and welfare is a mandate, or one of the mandates of the government. So I want somebody else to explain the next point, which is economic prosperity and poverty reduction. What do you think the government should do? What are the obligations around the government being able to provide economic prosperity, poverty reduction? So who wants to jump on this? I like that Richard is really, really active. I wish there was a second Richard on this call. Okpayemi Temitayo, do you want to go in to answer the question? How do you think the government, or what does it mean when they say the government is actually responsible for poverty reduction and economic prosperity? So I'll call you, just respond, or I assume that you're not participating in this class. Okpayemi Temitayo, Christian, Shuaib, yeah, it's been long I heard from Shuaib. So please feel free to unmute and answer quite quickly. I want us to just discuss the rest of what we have to talk about.
Can I go ahead?
Okay, Richard, just go ahead then.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. Well, to my own understanding, economic prosperity and poverty reduction can be done by a country to the citizens, because I will cite the instance of the United States of America. We all know that they are very prosperous, so they put some things in place that helps their citizens. So as Nigeria too, Nigeria is not left behind too. Nigeria is doing some things for the citizens. For instance, maybe giving incentives to the homegrown companies. For instance, maybe companies that are Nigerian companies. Nigeria can give them tax relief. So they produce in mass to help the citizens, like subsidy. Government subsidizes things for the citizens. For instance, recently we witnessed a hike in the payment for petroleum. Before, it used to be subsidized. We used to buy it for 90 something, 100 and something, but now we are buying it for over 1,000 naira. So after the removal of the subsidy, so we are really struggling with that. So I will say that economic prosperity of a country lies in the hand of the government. Like the government in power, they have to do everything to ease the burden of the citizens. And this government can actually do more. Government comes and go, so they all come with their plans that, okay, this is the plan I have for the masses, this is what I have for. So that's
Yeah.
the
Thank you very much, Richard. Interesting points you have made. I wouldn't deny that. Yeah. So when you hear economic prosperity, when you hear poverty reduction or even alleviation, yeah, this is the responsibility of the government. And by extension, I would say that if you don't know the basis for the things that you are advocating for, then your advocacy would hold no water or have no strong footing. Yeah, let me put it that way. So you need to know that most of the things that certain people advocate for and demand are actually born out of their knowledge and understanding of the Constitution and what is enshrined in the Constitution. Yeah. One of which is the fact that poverty reduction is the responsibility of the government. Economic prosperity is the responsibility of the government. So as a citizen, if you're not seeing it, you can demand for it. And that's why you see advocacy groups and whatever demands, even at individual levels also for that, because it had been included in the Constitution that if the economy of a nation as Nigeria must prosper, then it is actually dependent on Nigeria as a federation and its leadership. Yeah. So the government then has to take charge of economic prosperity. And what are they supposed to do? Implement policies that promote businesses, policies that promote entrepreneurship. And then this is where you want to begin to really ask yourself. I don't know how many of you, some of you that stay in Lagos, there was this bill on entrepreneurship that was undergoing one conversation as at 2000 and 2022, yeah, there's this bill that actually promotes entrepreneurship that was discussed, and then I think it was being signed at the time. I think it was being worked on. There was a policy group I was um, interacting with them that was actually working on that. So you might want to check out what existing policies are there on entrepreneurship within Lagos for small businesses and medium enterprise, yeah, SMEs, the allocations for that. You want to check out the policies that would favor your entrepreneurial ventures. Yeah, those things exist. So it's the responsibility of government to enact fiscal policies when it comes to finances, buying and selling. They are supposed to enact policies that would promote wealth creation for individuals, wealth creation for businesses. We're supposed to also create policies that would encourage technological transfer, policies that would support growth and development of certain businesses and parastatals. The government is also supposed to make allocations for capacity development that would also reduce poverty, the equipping of young persons. I think there are a couple of strategies that Lagos State has done. There's also one other program by Lagos State where they train young people. There was one center at Agege, there was another center in Yaba, and related. Yeah. So now these are efforts that the government is expected to take to be able to address poverty concerns and to be able to ensure economic prosperity. So the goal is that as individuals are prospering, so is the economy prospering. And those are the responsibilities of the government. So it will now be your own responsibility as an individual now to understand which of those policies and avenues are existing. And if they aren't, what exactly can you do about them? Temitayo, you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you very much. One thing I realized that when we talk about government, a lot of us, I for one, tend to fall into that category as well. when we hear government, the next thing we're thinking of is Abuja. The next thing we are thinking of is Tinubu. But we forget that there are 3 tiers of government, which is the federal, the state, and the local government. Now, a lot of us, we tend to ignore, we tend to focus on the federal, while we forget the state and the local government. There are ways, that's why sometimes when it comes to, we elect people in political power, and where they now have commissioners and ministers. Individuals can do that. Our right to vote places us in that space to be able to determine who is going to be in some certain areas of the government, which will then eventually help us to what is supposed to, let me put it that way, is supposed to help us to be able to create more wealth as individuals and as a nation. Now, I want to buttress the fact that when you were talking about advocacy, I remember the Niger Delta case. They have oil, but then companies have gone in there, extracted their oil. The government, the government the guns, and then there's unrest in the nation. If the country has been fair to its citizens and make sure that, if oil is being generated in Niger Delta, and there is maybe cashew in the north, sometimes some of these resources are not evenly distributed, but it's the position of is the responsibility of people in government, as per the state and as per the ministers and commissioners, to be able to put the right people who can harness, and then the federal into that kind of thing. So it's just unfortunately that doesn't happen in Nigeria. And those are just the way that I feel that, okay, like for example, another issue is this: if there's electricity, we almost 50 to 70% of this nation is made up of young people. That means we have the manpower has the opportunity and the wherewithal for us to be able to thrive and do things that will move our nation forward. So I'm sorry I'm so passionate about this country, because sometimes it really gets really upsetting when we are blessed with so much natural resources, and then just a few people are the ones enjoying or stealing it. Let's not say enjoying it, and those are just ways I feel that the nation can can be fair to its citizens. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your interesting contributions, Temitayo. Yeah, you said really, really valid and interesting things, and it takes one who is concerned and kind of pictures what the society looks like and how it can be made different to be able to articulate this point. Now, and this is just more or less a point out of the fact that I'm trying so much not to deviate by a far stretch, but yes, these are issues that are of concern to us as citizens, yeah, and the understanding of your rights and benefits would help you interact with these issues better. Yeah. Now, when you understand your rights and then when you understand the mandate of the government, then you can see how to tailor. I, for one, I beyond I do a number of things related to social impact and development, and that's the reason I was smiling pretty through everything you said, because yeah, quite valid, all of the things you've said. And to be able to get to that point, you need to understand what are the provisions that have been made available. What do the government owe me? What do the government owe the people? And what are the mandates from the government? What can I do? And what is the government expected to do for me? Now, there are laid down principles. The thing, if you tackle, and I alluded to advocacies earlier, which is one primary instrument that I recommend for the average citizen to use in meeting their needs or demands. Yeah, advocacy as a tool. If you understand the Constitution and the place of certain things and certain people in the Constitution, then you can better advocate and bring to the fore your demands. Yeah. So you mentioned something about the local government. The local government has a stake and the governmental procedures and governance in the country. The state government likewise, and then the federal government, they have a stake. Now, go through the constitution, understand the obligations of the local government, understand the obligations of the state government, bring in the narration of the gaps that you've been able to identify to the fore through your understanding of those things that have been documented. Those are the ways through which we use policy documents and constitutions to actually address certain key things in society. Some of the changes that are being implemented right now, issues related to development programs for youth, skill acquisition and training program, small business and medium enterprises, training, grants that have been made available. Those things are actually working because of the demands that some people have placed on these things based on the provision of the Constitution. I'm privy to this information, and apparently I work in spaces like that. So you need to understand the Constitution, understand the things that should be going on, and how that you can use that means to drive the change that you want to see. And so, yes, maybe let me just try to come back a bit, but thank you very much for that contribution. These are some of the things that the government should actually do. And maybe sometime, I don't know when next I might be having any interaction with any of you, but we can talk further on how to ensure that the government brings your demands to the point where they get to meet them. Another obligation of the government is the protection of human rights, protection of fundamental rights and liberties. We have freedom of speech, we have freedom to religion, association, assembly. They must ensure that that freedom is protected. If you feel that freedom is not protected, you have the legal right to complain. You have the legal right to make demands. You have the right to make your concerns also known. So those are like some of the mandates of the government provided in the Constitution. And next thing I'll talk about is the directive principles and policy of the Nigerian government on cultures, the mass media, national ethics, and duties of the citizen. Now this is a snapshot from the Constitution, and Chapter 2, Section 21 talks about the directive on Nigerian culture. So you can see the statement here that the state shall. Now, this is the responsibility for the state. Now, this is how the Constitution is written. And that's the reason I said when you interact with the Constitution, you will see the responsibilities for states, you see the responsibilities for local government, even for federal government. And that way, you can, through the gaps, then channel your advocacy or tailor your need to make demands. So the state shall protect, preserve, and promote the Nigerian culture, which embraces human dignity and are consistent with fundamental objectives. The state shall encourage development of technological and scientific studies which enhance cultural values. And this is on culture, so there's a provision for that in the Constitution. On the mass media, the press, radio, television, and other agencies of mass media shall at all times be free to uphold the fundamental objectives contained in this chapter. Some of you, maybe in terms of your business, you're also thinking, how can you even engage the mass media? Some of these things, there are some obligations that the mass media have, that you can take advantage of. But if you wouldn't read through this section of the Constitution, you wouldn't necessarily know. So it's just a call for you to see what is provided here. And then national ethics, of course, in previous anthem, some of these things were in it. And I think even in this current one, you can see elements of the fact that our national ethics include discipline, integrity, dignity of labor, social justice, religious tolerance, self-reliance, and patriotism. In this day and age, given recent happenings, it's been very difficult to see patriotic Nigerians. But I think in the course of this class, I've been able to see a number of patriotic Nigerians whose concerns lie beyond their individual businesses, but for a country that works. Now, duties of the citizens as provided in the Constitution, Section 24. It shall be the duty of every citizen to abide by the Constitution, respect its ideals and its institution, national flag, national anthem, national pledge, and every legitimate authorities. So as much as we want the government to do several things, And it can be very dicey because sometimes we also claim that some of those legitimate authorities are in their wrong. Yeah. But nevertheless, as your obligation as a citizen is that you respect the ideals and you also respect legitimate authorities. It's also your duty as a citizen to enhance the power, prestige, and good name of Nigeria, defend Nigeria, and render such national service as may be required. Respect other dignity, the dignity of other citizens, rather, and the rights and legitimate interests of others, and live in unity, harmony, and in the spirit of common brotherhood. That's important. As Nigerians, you're expected to live in unity and live with spirit of common brotherhood. Now, make positive and useful contributions to the advancement, progress, and well-being of the community where you reside. And I think this is one aspect of the Constitution that we as individuals should take seriously. How much positive contributions are you making in the community where you are in? How much positive contribution are you making to society? How much are you making to the progress of Nigeria as an individual? Yeah. I like to talk about this a lot, but even as one person, yeah, there's actually so much that you can do. The question is, how much contributions are you making, and how are you making those efforts count? One of the things you should know is render assistance to appropriate and lawful agencies. We've talked about this earlier on, just so that law and order can be maintained. I think it was about the one time I was driving by, I saw see something, say something, and the government will do something. Yes, I think that's it. And I think that's profound, and that basically connects with this. So as a citizen, you see something, you say something, and you expect that the government should do something about it. So you can then look at the gaps in all of these things. If it's certain reforms that you're looking at considering, if it is certain policies that there are gaps in, or if it is in terms of security or other issues that has to do with your rights and benefits as a citizen, say something about it. And then once you see something, just say something about it, and the government should do something about it, but do that through the appropriate quotas and following the appropriate means. Then declare his income honestly to appropriate and lawful agencies and pay his tax promptly. Interestingly, Temitayo has mentioned something related to payment of tax rather as the obligation of us as citizens. So yeah, it's your responsibility to declare your earnings, declare your income to the appropriate quotas, and you pay your tax promptly. And on my last slide is me saying thank you for listening. And I hope one way or the other you've been exposed to something in the course of this class. I'm going to get quick reactions from everybody, and I think I would spend about 5 minutes to take one or two questions. But yeah, Richard, what was the class like to you?
Oh, awesome. It was worth it for me. And you really did justice to the teaching. And being a government student myself, I really loved the class. So I enjoyed every bit of it. So
All
kudos
right.
and more strength, more power to your elbows, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank
Please,
you
I
very
have
much.
some question after when you're done, sir.
All right, that's fine. So I want to ask somebody else. Kristen, how was the class? Just taking quick feedback, and if I wasn't too pacey, you understand some of the things that we thought. I just want to know how good you did with listening to and participating in class. Kristen, are you able to speak? If you can't speak, use the chat. I would appreciate it. I just want to get your feedback. I think I see Jonathan typing. If you can speak, Shwaib, are you still on the call? Okay, I think I see a reaction from Paul. Okay, so I'll just take the moment to address a particular concern. Okay, Timothy, I see a reaction from Timothy. Yeah, so first off, on the IPPIS issue, which is a little bit disconnected from this conversation, but we can connect it by saying that we talked about the Office of the Accountant General and how that this is responsible for certain payment across the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Yeah. Now, the leadership of the university in Nigeria is quite a complex one. Yeah, or let me say tertiary institutions generally. The system with which it operates is complex, and to a large extent, I quite understand this based on my affiliations. Yeah, now, and typically the government pays agencies, state agencies, and related state agencies, federal agencies, and all of that. So it came as a system that was supposed to unify payments. Yeah. And of course, the IPS was just such that when that structure exists, payments will just be made from the Office of the Accountant General. It goes into different people at the end of the month. But there were some inconsistencies with payments as at when it was used. Yeah. So those inconsistencies, and then given the peculiarity of the academic staff union of universities, which operates in a very academic and different kind of fashion. Let me call it that. Yeah, because the academic system is complicated in how the universities are run, how the allocations for research, the allocations for payment for supervision, payment for investigation. I think, yeah, certain investigations, certain laboratory works, and everything in between. So there are modalities that work within the average university systems that the IPPIS would actually or is definitely bound to overlook. Yeah. So because of that, I think that was why ASU at the time pushed against all of these things, because it was just going to be paying their salaries. There were a couple of things that were the obligations and of course the merit of people working within the institution. There were people who were supposed to be paid for using laboratories, for provision of laboratory facilities. People also had to be paid for supervision of project students, carrying out certain field exercises and everything in between. So it's a structure that is quite different. And then a number of people will be on the losing side. And that's why they did frown at the idea of using IPPIS. So the difference between citizenship and indigenship, yeah, I think by that, you're saying being indigenous to a particular place, yeah. Based on my interactions at international levels, indigenous is actually a concept that has been defined in a certain way. Yeah. If you are known as an indigenous person, then you are known with a particular tribe. Yeah, so you have this strong affiliation and bond with a particular tribe. And so you're saying you're indigenous to the Khoisans. Yeah, you're saying you're indigenous to the Hausa Fulani. You are indigenous to the Yoruba. But if you're a citizen of the country, you're a citizen of Nigeria. So we are all citizens of Nigeria, I assume, at least based on all of the names I've seen here. I believe we all are citizens of Nigeria. We don't have anybody from Chad or somebody from Mali on the call. So yeah, we're citizens of Nigeria, and that's way different from citizenship, like I just explained. So I'm just looking through the charts. There's a form for every one of us to fill. Okay, Shuaib, I see your remark. Thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. You're good. But I love the class. Okay, that's Jonathan. You love the class. Thank you so much for time on the floor here. Good. So you can provide your feedback. The form is made available. Yeah, so maybe I have about 5 minutes to just quickly take questions if anybody just has any other thing extra so that I can wrap up running out of time already. Yeah, so Richard, just quickly ask a question.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You've answered part of the question, which was indigenship and citizenship. And I wouldn't like to say much about it because in the Nigeria of today that we find ourselves in, this is causing a lot of upstairs, or what will I say, friction. For instance, particularly in Lagos, even as at today, when you go online, you see some guys online posturing, saying a lot of things. So national cohesion or national unity we should take it as a priority, even though if there's complexity in our diversity, we don't need to be going about some things the way some guys are going about it online. So I wouldn't like to say more about that. You've actually said it all. So these are my questions, actually. My questions. I have just two. And the first one is about you really did justice to that topic and I loved it. And I'll still go back to the 1990 constitution in Nigeria. To be truthful, me, Nigeria has been,
Sorry, I'm
because we
losing
don't have
you,
a
Richard. Can you hear me?
oh, can you, I guess it's my connection. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, please. Yeah, take it again.
Okay. So I was referring to the constitution that, in my opinion, I think Nigeria is on autopilot because the 1999 constitution is obsolete. It's the amended version of the 1979 constitution, all formed by the military. And what the militaries form is what the democratic. Can you hear me? Can you
Yeah,
hear me,
yeah, sure.
sir?
Yeah. Please go.
Okay, so it's all the doing of the military guys. And to me, if we really want to advance as a country, I think we need to sit down and draft something that is suitable to this particular dispensation, not those 40 years ago decree by the military that was amended to become constitution. So I don't know what you can say about that because truly Nigeria need another constitution that will be helpful to all of us, all and sundry, all the part of this country.
All
Then
right. Thank you for
secondly, you
that.
made
Please, second
mention of,
question again.
yes, you made mention of social, is this social amenity, while you mentioned that like pension, something like that. For instance, in Nigeria, we don't have labor law. It's all to the fact that our constitution is not strong. You will see nearby African countries that were colonized by the French. Their labor law is so strong, their constitution is so good, it's protecting them. But down here in Nigeria, you will see foreign companies coming to Nigeria to extort us, to exploit us. There's nowhere we can run to. We don't have labor law that we can go and lodge complaint or to. So in short, all of it boiled down to we having a functional constitution. We having a functional constitution will give us a functional country. So what can be done for us to have not an amended constitution now, a real constitution, brand new constitution? Is it possible? Is it feasible?
All right. Thank you very much for your question. And I think answering your question, let me just quickly do a quick survey. Let me do a quick survey. If you have any other question aside Richard, can you raise your hand? If there are, you have any question or concern aside Richard? All right, so that's it. I'll just answer these questions, and that would be all from me today. And I'll call it a day. So yeah, to your question, Richard, the first of it, you're talking about the fact that even in Lagos today, we see issues about people trying to be indigenous despite us all being citizens. And I want you to know that those things happen. Yeah, I know it happens. And there are sentiments that, if viewed from a particular lens, might want to take credibility. But Nigeria is a federation. Yeah, and we all are citizens. And if you do not know, those kind of things can actually be addressed. There are ways to report these things, and you would have your legal backing to it. The problem with us having a lot of things or letting a lot of things slide is because we oftentimes don't know or don't have the knowledge that can back whatever step it is that we want to take. Yeah. So where there is indiscrimination on ethnic basis, you can actually tackle it very legally, following the right channels of making reports and then getting those things addressed. Yeah, there's a way to go around that. Then for the question on 1999 Constitution, trust me, I know there are a number of conversation and it has flopped. Yeah. Um, there is a need for a number of things. I said earlier on that I have my personal opinion that I might not be able to share on this call right now. But yes, your opinion is also valid and noted as to the need for a totally different constitution that takes into account our present day realities and incorporate all the things that have to be on ground for us to have a working system in Nigeria. No doubt about that. They are perfectly accurate. But it now begs the conversation, which I will really pose to you. I don't know what your career aspirations and what you're working on is like, but have you investigated what has been the constraints, yeah, to having a new constitution in Nigeria? Have you investigated efforts to come up with a new constitution in Nigeria? What has hampered it? Or if we now want to initiate the processes, what exactly is the starting point? How can it be achieved? How then do we engage these conversations? Those are the things that, in my opinion, I think you can really do your personal research and findings about. You see a couple of
Can I
interesting
say
things.
something? Can I say something, sir?
I'm sorry, I'm pressed for time. Let me just
So
wrap up this. Then once you add to that, no problem. We could just close. So you can investigate these things, see where the problem exactly lies, and see what effort is it. If you're really championing that cause, which is a worthy cause, what effort is it you want to make? What do you want to do about it? How do you want to push this narrative beyond just this class? Yeah, and you would see some interesting findings that perhaps might discourage you, but depending on your resolution, you'd find a number of things, and then you can tackle it from that front and see how that what you're asking for is not impossible, but at the same time is constrained by a number of things. The second question happened to do with the you said something about the labor law, I believe. Nigeria actually has a labor law. Yeah, it's called the Labor Act. The problem about the many things that we have in Nigeria is enforcement. Yeah, I'm not oblivious of that. There are a couple of things we have, but they are not properly enforced. So we have the Labor Act of 2004. Yeah, you might want to also check that out. Now, the problem with that is enforcement is oftentimes weak and not taken very seriously. Yeah, and then you would also see that there are informal sector dominating the Nigerian workforce. Yeah, there's this dominance of informal sectors within the Nigerian society, and then of course most times than not, these informal sectors will not even take into account whatever is existing within that Labor Act. Because first off, they don't even know that there is a labor act. They don't even know there are things that should be abided by. And it's not their fault oftentimes because awareness hasn't been made. And even the public parastatals that are supposed to enforce these labor laws have weak enforcement mechanisms. In worst cases, sometimes there are issues of corruption as well. But then when all of these things happen, it now makes it look as if the labor law doesn't even exist. Meanwhile, we need to tackle it from the point of awareness, we need to tackle it from the point of strengthening the existing mechanisms that we have so that we can serve beyond what we currently do and make Nigeria more prosperous than it currently is. So I'll just take a quick comment from you. I don't know if I'll react to that and then you're going to call it a day, Richard.
thank you so much. Thank you so very much, sir. You said it all. You said even beyond my expectation. I just wanted to
Mhm.
quickly say where you said we can do our research to know what about the constitution. You've also said part of it, corruption, and our leaders. The leaders are not really ready for this to happen. We are like in their grip, and it's going to take maybe mass resistance or protest before this can happen. But maybe in our lifetime, it might be possible. But that's what I want to say, sir. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. It was a good time having you. Thanks for having me. Also, I hope that you've learned one or two things. And for those who actively engaged me, I'm impressed. Thanks for engaging me, and I hope you do have a wonderful weekend. Over to you, the coordinator. Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much, Lawrence, for joining us today and for really taking us through the class or session today. It's been very interactive and interesting. I, for one, back in school days, I don't think I had interest in government or civic education, but you've made it so interesting for everyone on the call. So thank you so much. And please let's give a round of applause or reactions as we wrap up the class. Let's appreciate Lawrence for his time in class with us today. Okay, I can see it's coming. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining in today's class. I hope next week would be prompt and punctual in class. 10 o'clock is the time again, and let's have a wonderful time in class next week, Saturday. And please make sure you take your tests and assessments, as the case may be, whenever it is shared on the WhatsApp group, so that we know that you're serious with your studies. And when it's time to issue the certificates and what uh, and every other thing, you would not be left out. Okay, and for those of you, if you have questions, of course, you know you can always chat the admin of the group and it will be attended to. So thank you very much, everyone. We see you again next week, Saturday. Do have a wonderful, wonderful weekend ahead. Stay happy and stay blessed.